Chapter 1090. Ever since Chu Yang was reborn, he had never considered this matter. Or rather, there was no such thing in his memory. Until just now when Mo Qingwu said, "For you, I will dance to the heavens." Chu Yang was suddenly enlightened when he heard this sentence. When he thought of this poem, he thought of this person. Shui Leihan. So he had always neglected this person. What? Thinking of Shui Leihan, Chu Yang suddenly thought of many things. Only then did he realize that there were too many differences between this life and his previous life. In his previous life he was the poisonous sword revered martial artist. Although his name was resounding, he was only a revered martial artist. However, he was able to roam freely in the lower three heavens and even some places in the lower three heavens. There were no king-level experts in the lower three heavens at all. When Mo Qingji ambushed him, he only sent out 3 king-level experts. But in this life, Mo clan had more than 3 king-level experts? They even had emperor-level experts. In the upper 3 heavens, king-level experts were not even worth mentioning, emperor-level experts were not worth mentioning, monarch-level experts were just SOSO, saint-level experts were common, supreme-level experts. Looking at it now, there were probably thousands or even tens of thousands of them in the entire upper 3 heavens. In his previous life there were 2 legends, Supreme Martial Artist Chen Feng and Supreme Martial Artist Lu Yun. In the legends of the current generation of Supreme Martial Artists, there were only Ning Tianya and Bu Luqing, and now? Perhaps he was ignorant and inexperienced in his previous life, and when he reached the upper 3 heavens he was like a rat crossing the street, dying before he could even obtain the 5th fragment of the sword. But legends were legends after all. Was he that ignorant and inexperienced? And most importantly, Shui Leihan. Such a peerless talent whose name shook the heavens. In this life there was no one at all. Absolutely none. Completely none. Why was this so? Thinking of Shui Leihan, Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly felt a vague sense of familiarity. That fortune-telling elder, Xiao Yun and Mo Qingwu, on the path of 3 lives can mend the heavens, yin and yang must cherish the beauty, evil aura is awe-inspiring, do not speak nonsense. So familiar, Shui Leihan. So it was you. Chu Yang was stunned. He was now 100% sure that the fortune-telling elder he and Zi Sheqing met in Tianji City was the one who had become friends with him in his previous life, the world's #1 genius Shui Leihan. But at that time he did not recognize him. Who exactly was he? What exactly was going on? Chu Yang's mind suddenly turned into a mass of paste. The more he thought, the more confused he became. The more he thought, the more he didn't have a clue. He could only faintly feel that if he could solve all of this, then he would discover an earth-shattering secret. At this moment Mo Qingwu said, "That person is so strange." Chu Yang was startled. He looked up. A few hundred feet in front of him, there was a white-clothed man walking on the snow. This road was the only way to the medicine banquet. At this moment the streets were crowded with people. Although it was early in the morning, it was extremely lively. However, this white-robed man walked among the bustling crowd with a warm smile on his face. He looked very amiable, but it felt as if he had been lonely for tens of thousands of years. He was so out of tune with everything around him. This person stepped on the white snow, crunching as he walked. Every step he took left a deep footprint. It should be very strenuous to walk like this, but looking at his posture he was like a spring breeze, so leisurely and relaxed. It is very strange. Alarm bells rang in Chu Yang's heart. If he didn't guess wrongly, this person should be an extremely dangerous person. Just as he was thinking, this white-robed man had already walked to a place not far in front of them. He suddenly turned his head as if he had suddenly discovered the 2 of them. He smiled and said, "What a red-robed girl, really as cute as a pearl." Mo Qingwu blushed and hid behind Chu Yang. She only secretly revealed half of her face to watch. Chu Yang smiled and cupped his hands. "You flatter me, may I know who you are?" The white-robed man smiled and said, "Medicine master, not up to standard." He seemed to be smiling bitterly but was full of confidence. He said, "I didn't even pass the first round and was eliminated, so I went to watch the fun." Chu Yang smiled. "I see." He said, "Why don't we go together?" When he said this, the white-robed man also said, "Why don't we go together?" The 2 of them looked at each other and smiled. Chu Yang's smile was tolerant and amiable, while the white-robed man's smile was gentle and warm. But when Mo Qingwu saw the 2 of them smiling, she suddenly shuddered. The 2 of them walked side by side. The white-robed man smiled and said, "Brother Chu, this time, you are going to win the championship. I am here today specially to cheer you on." Chu Yang revealed a surprised expression and laughed. "So you know me?" The white-robed man shook his head and laughed. Brother Chu, you are the best. How many of the medicine masters in this Tianji city don't know you? Chu Yang laughed heartily in a very comfortable manner. He said, it depends on luck. Not necessarily, there are so many experts, I have no confidence at all. He said that he had no confidence at all, but his voice and expression were obviously fake modesty, obviously full of confidence. The white-robed man lowered his head and didn't seem to look at him. He said, Brother Chu, you don't have to be humble. With your attainments, it is not a problem for you to become number one in the world. At this moment, someone suddenly called from the roadside, Hey, Brother Lu. The white-robed man stopped and said apologetically, Brother Chu, I met a friend. Chu Yang hurriedly said, Brother, please go ahead. The white-robed man smiled apologetically and hurriedly turned to the side of the person who called from the roadside. The two of them were very intimate, as if they had met after a long time. Chu Yang and Mo Qingwu continued to walk in the thick snow. The two of them were still talking as usual. They turned a corner and entered another road. They were only a few hundred feet away from the venue of the medicine banquet. At the roadside just now, the white-robed man was still smiling, but his face had already turned cold. A black shadow appeared silently and asked with a smile, Brother Wu, is it him? The white-robed man shook his head and said, I don't think so. But this little one hides really well. You guys told me that he is a first-grade martial monarch, but there is a hidden sword will on him. Looking at the situation, his real cultivation is definitely at the level of a sword saint, and not lower than the 5th grade. The black-robed man heaved a sigh of relief and said, Then I am relieved. A sword saint is not scary. But since he is a sword saint, he must have come from the path of a sword emperor. And the tribulation sword master can never become a sword emperor. The white-robed man said, Yes. So, this Chu Yang is definitely not the tribulation sword master. But this young man is definitely not even 20 years old. He already has such a shocking cultivation and the inheritance of the medical saint. He can be said to be the one and only genius in this world. If this person develops, his future achievements may not be lower than that of the tribulation sword master. When the two of them were talking, when they said the words tribulation sword master, they gritted their teeth and were full of hatred. The black-robed man was silent for a while and said, Then Brother Wu, have you done it? The white-robed man snorted and said, Of course I won't let him off so easily. Along the way I have already poisoned him with 7 kinds of strong poisons. These 7 kinds of strong poisons are incurable. Usually they keep each other in check and he is fine. But once the time limit is reached, they will act up immediately. Like a sudden wind, there is no way to recover. During the finals I will let him act up. The black-robed man heaved a sigh of relief and said, Brother Wu, you have worked hard. The white-robed man smiled faintly and said, Not really, but to poison such a small character is a little demeaning. The two of them chuckled and suddenly disappeared. On the other side, Chu Yang turned the corner. The sword spirit's voice, which was almost dripping with cold sweat, came out. Oh my God, I really saw a ghost. Saw a ghost. Chu Yang was not surprised at all. He said calmly, That person just now should be Wu Jueqing, right? The sword spirit was startled. How did you know? I just know. Chu Yang smiled. Intuition. Then he said, He didn't recognize me. Then he said, If he did, then I would have become a pile of rotten meat by now. The sword spirit sighed and said, You are absolutely right. Wu Jueqing's hatred for the tribulation sword master far surpasses that of this Dharma supreme. Chu Yang said understandingly, Because Wu Jueqing's identity is special. As the successor of supreme martial artist Qin Feng, he is held in high regard wherever he goes. When has he ever suffered any setbacks or been cheated in his life? How can he not hate someone who has been played around with his whole life? He said casually, What kind of poison did he give me? The sword spirit was stunned. You can feel that he has poisoned you? Chu Yang smiled lightly. I can't feel it. Even until now I haven't felt it at all. But Wu Jueqing didn't specially come to me to say these few words. 7 types of poisons balance each other and cause paralysis. The sword spirit smiled. However, he doesn't want your life. Looks like he only wants you in the finals. Chu Yang clicked his tongue and said, Amazing. Can it be cured? The sword spirit said, Of course there is no problem. This type of poison can only be absorbed by the tribulation sword. If Wu Jueqing finds out that you are actually not poisoned, he will immediately know that you are the tribulation sword master. Wu Jueqing will then come and kill you. Even in the finals you won't be able to stop him. Chu Yang pondered and said, Is there any other way? Yes. The sword spirit chuckled. You can now put a bottle of spiritual spring water in your arms and drink half a bottle. This type of poison can be delayed for a period of time before acting up. I will extract the poison and you will complete the competition. Even if Wu Jueqing comes and sees the spiritual spring water, he will also know the reason. Chu Yang's eyes lit up. He made me paralyzed. Feng, it shouldn't be as simple as just stopping me in the finals. Instead, he should have other motives. Otherwise, with Wu Jueqing's status, why would he poison me? He might as well kill me with one palm. Wouldn't that be easier? Chapter 1091. The sword spirit thought for a while and said, maybe. Chu Yang pondered. Threatening him with the antidote. It's a little too naive. It should be just a part of the plan. Speaking up to this point, Chu Yang suddenly became excited. Tell me about the symptoms after the wind. Even if I used the spiritual spring water to delay it, it would still act up eventually. He poisoned me and I poisoned him. Isn't this a very normal thing? The sword spirit smiled bitterly. You even want to make use of this. You're really scheming. Chu Yang said, I was poisoned. How can it be considered scheming? Then he asked, I'm the only one poisoned, right? Is Jianghu all right? The sword spirit smiled bitterly. Wu Jueqing is also a person of great status. Do you think he would poison a little girl for no reason? Chu Yang snorted. Not necessarily. I don't trust any of these people now. After receiving the sword spirit's confirmation that Mo Qingwu wasn't poisoned, Chu Yang was relieved. The sword spirit thought for a while and said, however, compared to being poisoned, there's another more important matter. Therefore Wu Jueqing is here this time. We definitely can't let him go. If there's a battle, we really have to fight. Chu Yang frowned and immediately thought of something. He couldn't help but gasp. Sword intent. Yes. The sword spirit smiled bitterly. I sensed the aura of sword intent on Wu Jueqing's body. Chu Yang's face twitched. He immediately felt troubled. How can we get it back? There are 3 ways. The sword spirit said, the first way is to capture Wu Jueqing and extract the sword intent from him. He should only be keeping it for his own use temporarily and can't refine it. The tribulation sword intent can't be refined by others. Capture Wu Jueqing? Chu Yang smiled bitterly. Let's talk about the second way. The second way is to kill Wu Jueqing. The sword spirit smiled and said, the sword intent will automatically disperse from his body and then we can collect it. Chu Yang said speechlessly, you might as well not say it. Just based on Wu Jueqing's cultivation alone, it's already extremely difficult to kill him. Moreover, Wu Jueqing is the descendant of supreme martial artist Qin Feng. Moreover, Qin Feng clearly dotes on him a lot, even going as far as to use the method of stealing the sky and swapping the sun to save him from the tribulation-mending heavens. If Wu Jueqing dies, how can martial sage Qin Feng let the matter rest? And supremacy Qin Feng and supremacy Lu Yun are husband and wife. Am I supposed to fight Qin Feng and Lu Yun with my current strength? Let's consider the third option. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. The third method is to reveal your identity as Tribulation Sword Master and use the Tribulation Sword to absorb the energy swords, the sword spirit said with a bitter smile. Moreover, the distance must be within 1,000 feet. Black lines appeared on Chu Yang's face. This third method makes my crotch cramp even more. Is there a fourth method? No more. There are only 3 ways. The sword spirit was very straightforward. Fuck. Chu Yang was speechless. He asked the heavens, aren't you fucking cheating me? Given my insignificant strength, it is enough for me to dominate the lower 3 heavens. But, you want me to kill Wu Jueqing? Don't you think it's a bit too much to ask? The sword spirit said submissively, but you have experts by your side. Chu Yang was speechless. He rolled his eyes at him and sighed heavily. Then he left the tribulation space. He didn't want to waste any more words with the sword spirit. They were already at the end. No one was allowed to watch the finals of the medicine banquet. This was the rule. However, even though the rules were as such, there was still a sea of people present. Snow fell from the sky and the ground was full of people. Chu Yang whispered into Mo Qingwu's ear, Qingwu, when I enter the finals later, your teacher will come to look for you. Remember to tell him that Wu Jueqing is here. These 5 words. Let him pass the message to Moon Breeze. Don't let anyone else hear it. Do you understand? Mo Qingwu's eyes flashed with doubt, but she nodded heavily. Brother Chu Yang, don't worry. I will definitely do it. Okay. Chu Yang turned and walked toward the finals. Mo Qingwu waved her little fists behind him, jumping and shouting, Brother Chu Yang. Go for it. This caused a lot of people to look at him. The little girl didn't care at all. Chu Yang smiled and entered the gate guarded by the Medicine Valley's personnel. The other pharmacists selected that day were already present. Seeing Chu Yang walk in, everyone's expression was heavy, full of vigilance. Although they had already experienced it once, compared to this young man in front of them, they really felt that they had no chance of winning at all. The previous time, the result of doubling in half the time had almost completely destroyed all of this pharmacist's confidence. And this time, it was a finals with even greater significance. It directly involved the ownership of the title of #1 pharmacist in the world. After the finals this time, the refinement of the heaven-nourishing jade would begin immediately. Once the heaven-nourishing jade was completed, the nourishment of the heavens would begin on the third day. It would complete the magnificent feat of nourishing the heavens in the history of the heavenly realm. All of this glory would fall on the head of the champion of the finals. The snowflakes became denser and denser. In the end, one couldn't even see the figures on the other side. Such heavy snow was truly a rare sight. In the vast expanse of whiteness, the finals of the medicine banquet finally began. The high priest of the Medicine Valley personally came to greet the 10 people to enter the designated environment for the finals. When Chu Yang walked in as if telepathically, he looked back and saw a red shadow swaying high up in the distance. A crisp voice came from afar. Chu Yang. Go for it. It was Mo Qingwu's voice. A smile appeared at the corner of Chu Yang's mouth. This little girl has finally revealed her ambition. She thinks that I can't see her. She actually started to call me by my full name. With a smile, Chu Yang entered the arena. Outside the arena, at the top of a big tree covered in snow, Bu Luqing, dressed in green, stood with his hands behind his back. Mo Qingwu stood beside him. Her petite figure looked even more delicate in the white snow. At this moment in the cold weather, the little girl breathed out hot air, her face flushed red with excitement. There was a kind of infinite tenderness surging in her heart. I called his name. I don't want to call him Brother Chu Yang anymore. I want to call him Chu Yang. This is how husband and wife address each other. Sister Wu Qianqian has ambitions for him. She thinks that I can't tell. This is so embarrassing. At the thought of these two words, the little girl was so embarrassed that she felt as if she had a fever. She only felt that her body was a little weak and she actually almost fell from the treetop. Bu Luqing was shocked. He grabbed hold of the little girl so that she didn't fall from the sky. Supreme martial artist Bu was extremely puzzled. Although I haven't given this little disciple of mine a huge boost in her cultivation for the time being, she's already a first-grade martial saint. Why is it that she actually fell from the tree while standing with such a cultivation? This is really extremely strange. Under the high priest's lead, the 10 people entered the arena. Then the high priest led them into the huge palace that was almost made out of an entire mountain. Along the way there were many sentries. At the outermost periphery, there were monarch-level and emperor-level experts. As they went in, as the line of defense shrank, it became martial saint-level experts. There were more than one such line of defense. Then, when they entered the palace, Chu Yang realized that there was a person standing in every corner outside the palace. They stood solemnly and motionlessly. The fluttering snow had almost buried them. It could be seen that they were already here before the finals, perhaps a day or a few days ago. They were only guarding this empty field, to prevent anyone from sneaking in. Every one of these people was a supreme martial artist. Such a tight defense made Chu Yang feel a little shocked. Upon entering the main hall, a fresh and warm wind suddenly greeted them. There was also a strong fragrance of flowers, and the fragrance of herbs. There were more than 10,000 types of elixirs in the medicine banquet. There were hundreds of thousands of types. And there was definitely more than one stock of each type. They were all in this main hall. There were so many types of elixirs. Every type could be said to be a heavenly treasure. Most of the large clan stockpiles over the past 1,000 years, all the resources of the Medicine Valley over the past 1,000 years, all the heavenly treasures that the Zhuge clan had collected over the past 10,000 years. They were all here. The elixirs here were enough to make anyone in the world so excited that they would have a nervous breakdown on the spot upon seeing them. All the elixirs here were not packed in boxes. They were just laid out naked in circles. Their roots, tubers, flowers and petals were all exposed outside. At a glance, one could not see the end of them. They were densely packed, but there was no loss of medicinal energy at all. And the medicinal properties were not messed up at all. Although the elixirs were tightly packed together, they all seemed to maintain a safe distance from each other. This was the greatest characteristic of heavenly treasures. Independence. Only with this characteristic could a stock of elixir be qualified to be called a heavenly treasure. Moreover, each and every stock of spirit medicine was full of vitality under such circumstances. Some had tender shoots, some even grew new branches, and some even had flower buds. It was cold and snowy outside. Inside, tens of thousands of elixirs were actually flourishing, and there were even clusters of fresh flowers blooming, just like spring. This was just a very ordinary space. There was nothing special about it at all. How could this be? Looking at the clusters of blooming fresh flowers opposite him, Chuyang almost suspected that he was dreaming. In the middle of the main hall, there were 10 pillars with a radius of 10 feet. They were 50 feet tall and emitted a dark brown glow. It was unknown what material they were made of. At the top of the pillars there was a huge lotus. A strange aura was constantly being sucked in from all directions into this lotus land. The high priest's expression was solemn. He coughed and said, "Everyone, now is the time for the finals of the medicine banquet. This is the place of the great heaven reversing array. Where everyone is at is the position of the eye of the array." Chapter 1092. Chu Yang's heart couldn't help but tremble. It actually took 100 years to complete a formation. The high priest said slowly, "When this formation is completed, it will cover the entire world. Currently, all the fortunes of all the pharmacists in the world have already swept over from the upper and lower 3 heavens. A total of 810,000 heavenly treasures from the upper and lower 3 heavens are all gathered here. Currently, only Tianji City is missing. Everyone, this final round will decide the fate of the heavens." The high priest paused and swept his gaze across the 10 people. He said, "The interior of the great sky-turning formation is the most impregnable in the world. Everyone, the final round will be held here. The semi-final round has already tested everyone's level of refinement. It can be said that any one of you, as long as you become the champion, will be able to refine the heaven-nourishing jade. Therefore, your level of refinement will not be repeated. The 10 pillars in front of everyone and the lotus flowers on top are the paths of fortune. Between them are the flower buds. Everyone sit on them now. The first person to cause the flower buds of fortune to bloom will be the one with the strongest fortune and the champion." The high priest finished speaking. There was an uproar below. Chu Yang looked at everyone's shocked expression and instantly understood. It seemed like they didn't know about the selection method this time either. Or, it was beyond their expectations. The pharmacists from the big clans were extremely surprised. Because the final round of the medicine banquets in the past was always the extremely difficult medicine decomposition. For this matter, some of them had even made thorough preparations in advance. Who would have thought that the Medicine Valley would suddenly change their method at this crucial moment? This really left everyone at a loss. Everyone may be a little surprised, but this is normal. The medicine banquets in the past were indeed like what your seniors said, never changing. But this time, it will be the last time in 10,000 years. All the wrinkles on the high priest's face seemed to be smiling like a sly fox. Therefore this time the method is completely different from the past. This time the stakes are very high. Therefore, the final round this time is a competition of fortune. It has nothing to do with cultivation. It has nothing to do with mental strength. It has nothing to do with identity or experience. It has nothing to do with pure fortune. Among all of you, the one with the strongest fortune will be the champion. Then, he manipulated the 1,000 years of providence and fused the 810,000 types of heavenly materials and earthly treasures into one cauldron. This is the strongest heaven-nourishing jade. Only those with great luck are qualified to refine the heaven-nourishing jade this time. The High Consecrator said indifferently, "I must remind everyone that this grand formation is related to heaven and earth. Even if he wasn't the first, he would still have to wait until the Providence lotus bloomed. If anyone dares to play tricks, they will definitely die on the spot. Now let's begin the competition." They all stepped onto the top of the stone pillar in front of them. "After everyone enters your positions, I will immediately activate the grand array," the High Consecrator ordered. Chuyang was somewhat dumbfounded. The sword spirit in the tribulation space didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had thought that there was something unusual about the finals of the medicine banquet, but it turned out that it was just a competition of luck. If that was the case, who in the world could be as lucky as the master of the Calamity Sword? Even the human emperors, law enforcers, and Dharma supremes couldn't compare to the Tribulation Sword Master in terms of luck. Chuyang came to participate in such a competition, and the finals were actually like this. Wasn't this just plain bullying? The 10 of them looked at each other, but no one moved first. They all wanted to see how the others would react after they sat on it. Chu Yang laughed heartily. Then his body floated high up in the air. His black robe fluttered in the wind as he arrived at the centermost stone pillar. Then he stepped on it and lightly said, "Since no one wants to go first, then I will be the first one." He deliberately paused at the last three words of his sentence. After hearing it, one would have a feeling, "Then I shall be the first." What was the first? All the pharmacists were enraged. Then they all leaped up and went to the top of the stone pillar. After Chu Yang went up, he saw that there was actually a stone stool in the middle of the lotus for people to meditate. In front of the stone stool, there was a dense fog that seemed to be forming a pure white flower bud. But it wasn't fully formed yet, as if it could be blown away by a gust of wind. Chu Yang didn't hesitate anymore. He took 2 steps forward and sat cross-legged on the stone stool. Seeing that everyone had sat down, the High Consecrator looked solemn and shouted, "Grand Array! Rise!" All the supreme martial artists outside moved at the same time. Each of them used their lifetime's cultivation to strike a point in the sky directly above. Waves of energy surged into the sky like mountains and seas. All the energy converged at one point. Thousands of feet high in the sky, snowflakes were hazy. Suddenly, a burst of blazing white light spread out fiercely. The entire grand array, the entire competition venue, suddenly disappeared from everyone's sight. Chu Yang only felt that the hall had suddenly disappeared in an instant. His surroundings turned pitch black. Everything around him also disappeared at once. He actually seemed to be in an incomparably vast starry sky, sitting on a huge white lotus, and all around him was the vast universe. Stars dotted the sky. His position was like the core of the entire universe. Wisps of fog rose from Chu Yang's body, becoming thicker and thicker, and poured into the half-formed flower bud in front of him. The next moment, Chu Yang only felt lightning flashing and thunder rumbling in the sky above his head. But when he opened his eyes, nothing happened. When he closed his eyes, he felt lightning flashing all around him. Wisps of pure white fog gathered from all directions, no less than thousands of wisps, and then more and more, tens of thousands of wisps, hundreds of thousands of wisps, millions of wisps, tens of millions of wisps, like hundreds of rivers flowing into the sea. They entered the flower bud in front of Chu Yang. The flower bud solidified at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then, slowly, a jade-green vine extended from the bottom of the flower bud. It was covered with fine hairs and thorns that were only found on the stem of a lotus. Holding the flower bud, it continued to rise. In the time it took to burn half an incense stick, it actually grew to a width of several feet and a height of more than 100 feet. Above, the flower bud that had already solidified began to slowly expand at this time, bigger and bigger. The high priest stood on the original stone platform and gasped. "This Chu Yang, what a strong fate energy." Looking from his direction, he saw that the lotus stalk on the stone platform where Chu Yang was standing. It was dozens of feet tall and several feet thick. But in front of the other person, the lotus stalk was only as thick as a finger. It had a small and pitiful bud on top of it. It hadn't even fully solidified yet. This was an overwhelming comparison. There was no comparison at all. So it's the heavenly fortune formation. In the tribulation space, the sword spirit was enlightened. "I thought it was something mysterious, so it's like this? It's using the fate energy of the world's pharmacists to save lives, to refine the heaven-nourishing jade, intercepting the fate energy of the tribulation sword master to repair the cracks in the universe." Chu Yang asked curiously, "The previous tribulation sword masters have never participated in the medicine banquet?" "No." The sword spirit smiled bitterly and said, "Not every tribulation sword master is as weird as you. Under normal circumstances, the tribulation sword masters are not in the upper 3 heavens during the medicine banquet. This is because after experiencing the spiritual impact of the lake of despair, the tribulation sword masters will fall into a long coma. And during this period, the heavens will be closed. Only after the tribulation sword master has trained for a period of time can he secretly enter the upper 3 heavens and start his journey as a tribulation sword master. If nothing happened to you, you would also be in the upper 3 heavens now. But, you have a father and mother who were separated from you when you were a child. This is really fucking. They found you when you were in a coma. They brought you back to the upper 3 heavens. This has never happened before in the previous generations of tribulation sword masters." Chu Yang raised his eyebrows and said, "I see. Then what's with the heavenly fortune formation? How should I deal with it?" "The heavenly fortune formation is to go against the heavens and take fate energy," the sword spirit said. "Using the power of the formation to communicate with the universe, using the power of the universe to suppress and intercept the fate energy of the tribulation sword master and tribulation to mend the heavens. You are the Tribulation Sword Master, so how can you intercept your own fate energy in this formation? On the contrary, by urging the fate energy here, you can intercept the fate energy of the big clans and transmit it to your brothers. The sword spirit sighed deeply. This is really heaven's will. I've never seen such a fucking thing. 1,000 years of hard work and tens of millions of people working together, but all for one person, and he doesn't even realize it. Intercept the fate energy of the big clans? Chu Yang's eyes lit up. Oh. The sword spirit said, wait a while, when the lotus blooms to the extreme, you can chant Tribulation's name in your heart. With the help of the heaven-defying power of the formation, you can naturally extract fate energy from the formation eye and transmit it to them. Who is Tribulation? Chu Yang frowned. This question made the sword spirit speechless for a long time. You, as the Tribulation Sword Master, you actually don't know who is your Tribulation? Chu Yang rolled his eyes. How would I know? The sword spirit was completely defeated. Aren't Gu Duxing, Dong Wuxiang and the others your Tribulation? He said somewhat exasperatedly, Gu Duxing is sharp and lonely, so he is the sword tip. Dong Wuxiang is powerful and domineering, so he is the sword edge. Ao Shiyun is cold and sharp, so he is the sword edge. Mo Qinji is the master of calculation and manipulation, so he is the sword spirit. Luo Kadi is the sword guard. Rui Badong is agile and changeable, so he is the sword tongue. Xia Danxiong is steady, so he is the sword pommel. GMO may be funny, but he is steady and loyal, so he is the sword hilt. As for the sword tassel, it is up to the sword master to decide. Chu Yang finally understood. I see. When the time comes, you only need to chant their names in your heart, and the fate energy of the big clans will naturally be diverted. The sword spirit said excitedly. Then, after the fate energy is diverted, will it be seen? Can the heaven-nourishing jade still be successfully refined? Chu Yang asked. The great heavenly fortune formation is heaven-defying, how can it be seen? Besides, there is no change in the fate energy of the pharmacists in the world. It is only the previous and future tribulations that are related to you. What does it have to do with the heaven-nourishing jade? The sword spirit rolled his eyes. Chapter 1093. As the power of destiny flowed in from all directions, it grew stronger and stronger. The lotus flowers in front of the pharmacists also began to slowly open their petals. One by one the petals slowly opened. It was filled with the rhythm of life. Immortality, humans could not be compared to each other. Chu Yang's lotus flower was several feet wide and had not fully opened. However, the other's lotus flowers were only the size of an ordinary lotus flower. Comparing the two, it was like comparing a fluorescent light to a bright sun. The next moment, an accident suddenly occurred. Under the high priest's incredulous gaze, the pharmacist from the Yi clan suddenly groaned and blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth. Then, his face wrinkled and his entire person became exhausted. His eyes were wide open and his mouth gurgled. In an instant he actually stopped breathing. The lotus flower in front of him also seemed to have withered and its petals fell one by one. Once they fell, they turned into green smoke and flew away. Then the entire lotus flower completely withered. It drooped down softly. Then the stem also drooped down softly and turned into a puff of green smoke, disappearing without a trace. What's going on? The high priest was shocked and was about to go forward to check on it. However, he realized that the pharmacists from the other big clans also showed the same symptoms. They groaned and then died. Then their lotus flowers dissipated. 10 pharmacists participated in the finals and one of them died in the finals. Only Chu Yang was left. What was the point of competing? Even if he was not the champion, he was already the champion. But what was going on? The high priest was dumbfounded. He raised his hand to hit his head and rubbed his eyes. I must have seen wrongly. I'm crazy. I'm going crazy. Oh my God. What's going on? The pitiful old man watched in a daze as the pharmacist died an unnatural death and the lotus flower turned into nothingness. He was dumbfounded. After a long time he finally regained his senses. He leaped into the air and carried these people down. He lined them up in front of him and hurriedly checked on them with a pale face. What's wrong? What's wrong? Soon after, he discovered that their faces were all wrinkled, completely different from the previous smooth and rosy complexion. He tried to grab them, but he didn't expect that with this grab, he would actually tear them off. The high consecrator jumped in fright again. He clutched his face, his heart thumping wildly. Taking a closer look, he saw that the face of the person who had scratched off his face was badly mutilated. The high consecrator was startled and hurriedly scratched the faces of the others. As expected, all of them were like this. He continued to check. Finally, the great consecrator raised his head and cursed with a face full of grief and despair. Soul transfer magic art. My fucking big family. Fuck your 18 generations of ancestors. You bunch of sons of bitches. He actually used the soul transfer technique to play tricks during the medicine banquet. Fuck your mothers. An old man with a head full of white hair and a face full of wrinkles. An old medicine man who had lived for who knows how many years, cursed without caring about his appearance. Obscenities are endless and they are cursing whatever is vicious. What kind of hatred was this? In an instant, the High Consecrator completely understood. The big clans and the 2 law enforcement officers. In order to obtain first place in the medicine banquet and obtain that piece of heaven-nourishing jade, they actually used the method of substituting experienced pharmacists who had participated in the medicine banquet before to replace them. They used the soul transfer magic art to obtain temporary luck and qualifications as a medicine master. They entered the finals. However, this last medicine banquet was different from the previous ones. They directly extracted luck. Therefore, in this place of luck, this medicine master's true colors were revealed. The new and old luck clashed, and he couldn't get down from the heaven-turning stage. He actually directly died from the aftereffects of activating the soul transfer magic art in advance. After figuring this out, the High Consecrator felt weak all over. He couldn't wait to bang his head and die here. He didn't even have the mood to curse anymore. You want to be first, sure. You want the heaven-nourishing jade, sure. But don't joke about the medicine banquet that concerns the future of the entire heavens. And it's the most important one. Isn't this a complete bastard? It's over. This was the only word in the High Consecrator's mind. Only when the luck was divided into 10 and the luck of the 10 lotuses combined would it become the luck formed by the sharpness of the first medicine master. It would be enough to catalyze the heaven-turning formation, sweep in hundreds of thousands of elixirs, open the passage to heaven, draw in the power of heaven and earth, and then use the power of heaven and earth to refine the heaven-nourishing jade. Now one of them had died. What was the point of continuing? The High Consecrator raised his head in despair and looked up. The next moment, his whole body suddenly shook and he stood there dumbfounded. Poor old man. In this short period of time, his whole body shook again and again, and there was no end to it, because the lotus above Chu Yang's head actually expanded again. The destiny that had already disappeared seemed to have been reignited. It once again turned into a faint green smoke and entered Chu Yang's huge lotus. The High Consecrator was so shocked that he almost lost the ability to think. He could actually support the entire medicine banquet with his own luck. He couldn't help but cry. He knelt on the ground and prayed repeatedly, I pray for heaven's blessing to complete this medicine banquet. Chu Yang, you must hold on. This was the only hope. On a faraway mountain, Wu Jueqing, who was dressed in white, smiled lightly. He stretched out his palm gently and made a simple gesture. He closed his palm and then opened it again. In his palm, there was already a ball of colorful air. The air was dense. Break. Wu Jueqing smiled lightly and closed his palm once again. That ball of colorful air suddenly dispersed with a pop sound. Wu Jueqing smiled lightly. Chu Yang observed with rapt attention, feeling the degree of bloom of the lotus above his head. Only the last 3 petals were left before it could fully bloom. He was secretly delighted. It looked like his wish was about to come true. Right at this moment, an indescribable feeling suddenly arose in his body. Then, in the next moment, half of his body went numb. Wu Jueqing's 7 deadly poisons finally took effect at this crucial moment. Chu Yang let out a muffled groan. The High Consecrator was full of confidence and joy. He looked at Chu Yang alone with unease, praying to the gods and immortals in his heart. But, Chu Yang's body trembled violently, and his heart instantly rose to his throat. Fuck, could this one also be a fake soul transfer spell? If that's the case, it's really over this time. He looked closely at Chu Yang's face, thinking to himself, once wrinkles appear, it means that this medicine banquet is a complete failure. Then he realized that there were no wrinkles on Chu Yang's face. Just as he was about to heave a sigh of relief, he saw 7 different colors rising on Chu Yang's face. Then Chu Yang's body stiffened a little. 7 shades poison. The High Consecrator's eyes widened to the size of copper bells. He roared in grief and indignation, Wu Jueqing. Fuck your ancestors Qin Feng and Lu Yun. He never expected that when there was only a little bit of hope left, this Wu Jueqing who had disappeared for tens of thousands of years actually popped out to cause trouble. 7 shades poison. In this world, only Wu Jueqing alone could use it. The High Consecrator's heart turned cold. However, the lotus above Chu Yang's head only stopped blooming and didn't completely disperse. It just stayed still in the air. Then Chu Yang took out a jade bottle with purple crystal cores with some difficulty. He opened the bottle and gulped down 2 mouthfuls of purple crystal cores. Then with a ha sound he spat out a mouthful of 5-colored poisonous fog. Although there were still some remnants of the 7 shades poison on his face, it had temporarily returned to normal. The high consecrator stretched his neck out and his eyes almost popped out. What did he drink? He could actually cure. No, suppress the 7 shades poison? So powerful? The next moment, Chu Yang straightened his body with difficulty and sat up straight again. After a short while, the huge lotus above his head actually started to grow again and slowly bloomed. The high consecrator's eyes were brimming with tears. At this moment he almost had an impulse to worship Chu Yang. What kind of perseverance was this? What kind of spirit was this? What kind of selfless and fearless spirit was this? His life is at stake and he's actually still working hard for the medicine banquet. While the high consecrator and Chu Yang were waiting eagerly, the huge lotus finally bloomed completely. It had a radius of 100 feet. It illuminated the entire space and made it look pure and holy. At the same time, Chu Yang felt that there seemed to be countless fairies in colorful clothes in the deep sky in front of him, holding flower baskets in their hands, singing and dancing. The sound of singing that filled the world seemed to resound in his soul. A feeling of incomparable tranquility arose spontaneously. Suddenly, 10 thick pillars of providence shot out from the lotus flower. It was unknown where they were going to shoot to. The sword spirit's voice sounded. Now intercept the fate energy. The array is operating at its peak now. As long as the celestial music is still being sung, every name you say will effectively intercept the fate energy. Chu Yang closed his eyes and said silently in his heart, Gu Duxing. That pillar of fate energy suddenly changed direction. Dong Wushang. Mo Tianji. GMO. Ao Shiyun. Luo Kadi. Rui Badong. Xie Dan Xiong. There were already 8 names. The sword spirit was thinking who would be the sword tassel. Then he heard Chu Yang say, Mo Qingwu. The sword spirit hurriedly stopped him. No, you can't have the same surname. Chu Yang continued. Tan Tan. Chu Yang's voice was firm. Tan Tan might not be able to do it. The sword spirit panicked. Duke Yu. Zi Xieching. Meng Chaoran. Chu Yang couldn't stop chanting. Too much, too much. Too much. The sword spirit was so anxious that he stomped his feet. There's only one quota. How many have you chanted? Are you trying to empty out the big clans? Chu Yang ignored him and continued, Chu Feiling Yang Rulan Chu Lur Mo Lei, Wu Chanshan Tai Budian Huyan Albua Jun Shiju Feng Euro Yu Lingxue Bu Luqing Ning Tianya. This master actually recited all the names that were related to him, those that he thought highly of, those that were friendly, in this limited celestial music. The sword spirit was stunned. He sat stiffly in the tribulation space, cold sweat all over his body. Chapter 1094. It's over, it's seriously over. This time it's really a mess. The sword spirit wanted to cry but had no tears. Tribulation sword master, tribulation sword. As the name suggested, it was a, but how many have you read? You've read 18 names already, too ruthless. You're too ruthless. Gu Miaoling. Chu Yang finally read out the last name and stopped. The faint chanting in the air also abruptly disappeared at this moment. One by one, the destiny pillars separated and turned into rainbows, disappearing into the horizon. The sword spirit broke out in cold sweat. Because when he read out the last 2 names, the destiny pillars that separated again were already very weak. This meant that the 10,000 years of destiny of the big clans had already been sucked dry by Chu Yang. This was definitely a huge move to remove the firewood from under the cauldron. It was also extremely cruel and vicious. Chu Yang recited the names of almost all the people who were related to him. He also recited the names of his brother's wives. He was practically afraid that he wouldn't be able to extract enough. At the same time, the Yi clan. At a place surrounded by mountains and rivers, surrounded by the Yi clan. It was where the ancestral grave of the Yi clan was located. When the Yi clan built the ancestral grave, they had invited a powerful expert to check the feng shui. This place had golden gates, jade ribbons, and golden dragons. It was a place where dragon's sword and phoenixes danced. It had excellent feng shui. There were 3 dragons gathered underground, slightly protruding and higher than the surroundings. It was the land of kings. But at this moment there was a sudden boom. A huge collapse suddenly appeared on the mountain behind the ancestral grave of the Yi clan. The whole mountain ridge seemed to have snapped from the ground. Thunder boomed from underground. Underground where no one could see. The earth veins suddenly broke and turned into nothingness. The golden and jade light flashed wildly and disappeared without a trace. Vaguely, it seemed as if a golden dragon had broken free from the shackles on its body. With a long roar, it rose into the sky and disappeared into the horizon. The Yi clan was in chaos. At the same time, the Shao clan, Jia clan, Qin clan, Ling clan, and the other 8 big clans also had the same situation. Collapse. Collapse. Still collapse. The whole upper 3 heavens was in chaos. At an unknown place. Ning Qinya, covered in blood, was sitting cross-legged and recuperating. After being seriously injured by Wu Jueqing and the Dharma Supreme, the injuries Ning Qinya sustained this time could not be said to be light. Moreover, only Ning Qinya himself knew. Actually, the thing that had truly injured him was only that final sneak attack from Wu Jueqing's sword intent. He had originally thought that he had successfully created a facade to confuse them by retreating in defeat earlier. But he didn't expect Wu Jueqing to be so meticulous and so vicious in his actions. Moreover, Ning Qinya didn't expect Wu Jueqing to be able to use the sword intent of the Calamity Sword Master. This was something that no one would have thought of. Ning Qinya knew that at that time the only option was to fight. Moreover, since they had already made up their minds to deal with Buluqing and the others, as long as he was unharmed, they would not make a move. Thus he pretended to be defeated and fled. He was prepared to rush to Tianji City the moment they let down their guard. Together with Buluqing they would beat them at their own game and kill them all. But he had never expected that Wu Jueqing would actually have such a backup plan. He actually managed to release an energy sword at that moment. This time, it made Supremacy Ning's attempt to be clever end up backfiring. The sword intent exclusive to the master of the Calamity Sword was incredibly powerful. This sword intent almost killed Ning Qinya. Supremacy Ning found this place to recuperate miserably. But the injuries inflicted by the sword intent healed extremely slowly. Currently there were only signs of improvement. He was in the middle of circulating his energy when suddenly, an inexplicable force came through the air. Before Ning Qinya could react, it had already entered his body. In an instant, Ning Qinya felt his body lighten up. This force didn't help his injuries much, but Ning Qinya felt relaxed all of a sudden. Moreover, his potential seemed to have increased imperceptibly. His injuries were still painful, but he suddenly felt much better. Ning Qinya was shocked. He opened his eyes at once. Where did so much power of fate come from? Who is so kind as to transfer the power of fate to me? This is an incredibly troublesome matter. And it will even affect the karma between heaven and earth. Lower 3 heavens. In the Iron Cloud Imperial Palace. Tai Budian was lying on the bed, hugging her son to sleep. In a daze, she seemed to have had a dream. In the dream, she saw Chu Yang walking slowly to her with a smile on his face. With a point of his finger, a ray of white light entered her forehead. Tai Budian was jolted awake with a start. She felt extremely comfortable all over and was at a loss as to what had happened. She murmured, "You nemesis, I've dreamt of you again. It's just that this time it's so real." Sigh. She let out a low sigh, all sleepiness gone. She bent down and looked at her son's sleeping face. She couldn't help but miss him. Right at this moment she felt that her body was a little strange. Her son was already more than a year old and had been weaned. At this moment she only felt her breasts swell. Tai Budian looked down in shock, only to see milk oozing out of her breasts again. What's going on? The Empress' eyes were wide open as she stared at her own voluptuous breasts. She was in a daze. In different places, Buluqing, Mo Qingwu, Yulingxue, Feng Yuro, Wu Chanshan, Chu Feiling, Yang Rulan, also had a strange feeling at the same time. It seemed that they were different from before. Apart from Buluqing and Feng and Yu, who knew that this was the power of fate and were even more shocked, the others were all at a loss. Zi Sheqing also benefited from it. Feeling the increasingly abundant power of fate, Zi Sheqing had a complicated look in her eyes. "I originally wanted to leave here and never see you again for the rest of my life. I didn't expect you to use such a method to increase my power of fate again. Although you only had good intentions and didn't have any other intentions, you didn't know that for someone from beyond the heavens like me, owing others favors is one thing, but this illusory fate is one that I can't get rid of. From now on, even if we're in different parts of the world, my fate will be closely linked to you. Isn't this just killing me?" Chu Yang's brothers had a different reaction from these people. Rui Budong and Dong Wushang were fighting and practicing. Suddenly, the two of them screamed at the same time, one throwing his saber and the other throwing his sword. Dong Wuxiang grinned in surprise. Strange, we're in the middle of a battle, why did we suddenly have a dream? Rui Badong was dumbfounded. I had a dream too. I dreamt of Boss. Boss slapped me with a sneaky smile. But this is a battle. God, what's going on? You had a dream too? The two of them stared at each other, dumbfounded. Then they turned to look at the dark saber and sword that they had thrown on the ground, their faces full of disbelief. 3 days. In a mysterious place of space. A few people were sitting cross-legged and practicing with solemn expressions. Above everyone's head, there were 3 clouds of white mist that were almost solid, condensing and swaying, as if they were flower buds that were about to bloom. Beside them was an incomparably huge golden dragon. It was just that right now, more than half of the golden dragon's tail had already disappeared. They were Gu Duxing, Mo Qinji, Luo Kadi, GMO, Ao Shiyun, Xie Danxiong and the others. At the same time, the people who were fully focused on meditation suddenly seemed to have seen at the same time. Chu Yang had a mysterious, sneaky smile on his face, as if he had done some kind of prank that was usually very satisfying. Using his hand to guide the clouds of white mist, he pointed a finger at his own forehead. Then the clouds of white mist suddenly disappeared into his body. At the same time, their bodies shook violently and at the same time, then they saw that the mist on the golden dragon's body suddenly became thicker, and the speed at which it released spiritual energy was actually twice as fast as usual. They opened their eyes at the same time, their eyes filled with confusion and longing. I dreamt of Boss. Gu Duxing frowned and muttered, he seemed to have given me something. Xie Danxiong too, a thoughtful look on his handsome face. I dreamt of it too. I dreamt of Boss pointing a finger at the top of my head. Yes, yes, yes. GMO jumped up and waved his arms and legs, shouting, I dreamt of it too. Wah. Boss's face had the expression of a weasel who had successfully stolen a chicken. Wah, so disgusting. Mo Qinji's handsome face was filled with obvious excitement, and his eyes were sparkling. It was very different from his usual calmness. It was as if he was a completely different person. Qinji, could it be that you know what happened? Ao Shiyun was very careful, and when he saw Mo Qinji's expression, he immediately felt that something was very unusual. Mo Qinji's face was filled with excitement, and he suddenly became a little flustered. He even reached into his clothes in a panic and took out a copper coin, shaking his head to signal everyone not to speak. Then he suddenly activated the world-controlling divine technique. It was a solemn scene and the copper coins flew into the air at the same time. Mo Qinji kept making mysterious and complicated hand gestures, and his expression was extremely serious. The next moment, the golden copper coins suddenly emitted a brilliant light in the air at the same time. Then they landed on the ground at the same time and each coin was facing up. The moment they landed, the golden light was so brilliant that even with the cultivation of the brothers, they couldn't look directly at it. They only felt that the golden light in front of them was brilliant, as if they were in a palace of jade. Mo Qinji waited for the golden light to fade before he focused his gaze. With one look he was overjoyed. This is the power of fate. Mo Qinji's face was filled with uncontrollable excitement. Boss has succeeded. Do you know? Do you know? Ah. Gu Duxing and the others saw that Mo Qinji suddenly looked a little crazy, and they couldn't help but feel nervous. They hurriedly asked, what's wrong? Tell us quickly. Mo Qinji took a deep breath but it still didn't work, so he took another deep breath and then took deep breaths for a while. Then he turned his head and looked at the 5 of them with a burning gaze. He said, this is the power of fate. Boss has extracted the fate of the big clans of the upper 3 heavens and injected it into our bodies. Chapter 1095. In other words, the luck of the big clans is now on the few of us. Mo Tianji said word by word. Ah. Everyone exclaimed in unison. This boss is really, wow, so cool. GMO and Luo Kudi couldn't help but be stunned. After a long while they were overjoyed. Gu Duxing, Ao Xie Yun and Xie Danxiong were also overjoyed. Boss is still here. Still here. Still here. Gu Duxing laughed and tears suddenly flashed in his eyes. Mo Tianji smiled faintly. He felt that the blood in his heart was surging. It took him a while to calm down. After calming down he spat out a mouthful of blood. The backlash of prying into the secrets of the heavens only took effect now. But Mo Tianji didn't care at all. If it was before he might have lost his lifespan. But now with the powerful luck that Chu Yang injected into him, Mo Tianji didn't care. Why would he care about this little backlash? We must hurry up and practice. Mo Tianji said word by word, go out as soon as possible and kill our way up to the upper three heavens. Let's help boss. Yes, boss transferred our luck to us, but it doesn't mean that we are invincible from now on. Gu Duxing poured cold water on them as usual. Ji Mo and Luo Kudi, who were a little proud and happy, said, if the two of you don't work hard, you will be killed when you go up. Even if you are given 10 times more luck, you will only be a corpse. A pile of rotten meat. The brothers seemed to have formed a routine with each other. Mo Tianji pointed out the general direction and took charge of the overall situation. Gu Duxing led the people. Whether it was practicing martial arts or doing things, Gu Duxing was there to urge them. And the one who played the role of being cold and heartless was precisely Gu Duxing. When they met those who didn't cooperate, especially when GMO and Luo Kadi occasionally slacked off, what greeted them was a very crazy gale. Torrential rain. Nao Xie Yun and Xie Danqiong acted as peacemakers, playing the role of a jack of all trades. If they really couldn't get out of the situation, the two of them would stand up. They would appear and turn the friction into nothing. It had to be said that such a combination was really wonderful. It was just that GMO and Luo Kadi had to suffer. Their aptitude couldn't be compared to the others, so it was inevitable that they would feel discouraged. But every time Gu Duxing's thunderous storm would also come. Then, the two of them competed in terms of their training capacity. It was so difficult for people to double their strength, to catch up. Only in this way could the small groups advance together. No. Gu Duxing was beating him as usual. GMO and Luo Kadi had bitter looks on their faces. She lowered her head and muttered, I'm just happy for a while. Wait until we unify the heavens. There will be plenty of time for you to be happy. Gu Duxing said sternly, now let's wait until we unify the heavens. Little by little. He couldn't even let himself get carried away. What? You two want to spar with me? Luo Kadi and GMO were startled. They shook their heads like rattledrums. Everyone began to practice, not mentioning anything else. Luo Kadi gritted his teeth. While no one was paying attention, he whispered into Ji Mo's ear, look, second brother Gu is getting more and more arrogant. He's acting like a tyrant. I really want to beat him into a pulp. GMO turned pale with fright. He cried out in an exaggerated manner, what? You want to beat second brother Gu into a softy? You're too crazy. Luo Kadi stared at GMO dumbfounded. He never thought that his closest comrade would betray him so cruelly at this moment. He was filled with grief and indignation. GMO, you betrayed me, second brother Luo? Looks like your bones are itching. Gu Duxing had already flown over. With a black face, his iron fists and steel legs came down on his head. Luo Kadi didn't have time to dodge. He was knocked to the ground. What followed was a thunderous lesson. GMO looked at him with a clear conscience and smiled. Damn it, if I don't use you to let second brother Gu vent his anger, wouldn't he come looking for me? Humph, it's better for you to get beaten up than both of us getting beaten up together. Everyone felt a chill. Practice. Gu Duxing grabbed Luo Kadi, who looked like a pig, and threw him out. I'll castrate whoever talks again. Under Gu Duxing's high pressure. So a new round of practice began in full swing again. Chuyang continued. That huge lotus flower continued to bloom in the sky, emitting a holy light. The world's providence continued to gather from all directions. No one knew. At this moment, there was already a fundamental, earth-shaking change. Somewhere in the city. What's going on? Wu Jueqing, who was dressed in white, suddenly frowned. He looked at his palm. There was a cloud of rainbow-colored smoke was slowly converging. It seemed to want to gather but couldn't, yet didn't dissipate. The Dharma Supreme stood quietly in front of the window with his hands behind his back. Looking at the falling snow outside, he smiled and said, Brother Wu, what's wrong? It's very strange. Wu Jueqing looked at the colorful smoke in his palm and said in a low voice, This is very strange. This Chuyang was obviously poisoned, but it dissipated, but not completely. If it was completely dissipated, I would have the confidence to confirm that he is the Tribulation Sword Master. But now what's going on? Wu Jueqing was deep in thought. After a while, he slowly stood up and said, I'll go and take a look. The Dharma Supreme nodded. Go quickly and come back quickly. Right at this moment, just as Wu Jueqing was about to move, suddenly, there was a loud sound of mountains collapsing and earth cracking in Tianji City. The huge tremor caused the snow on the ground to rise several feet into the air. Countless houses collapsed with a loud crash. What's going on? The Dharma Supreme and Wu Jueqing looked at each other. The next moment, the Dharma Supreme summoned the person in charge of the Zhuge clan. After a while, an elder in hemp robes flew in. Lord Dharma Supreme, Lord Wu. Brother Tsangqiong, why have you come out personally? The Dharma Supreme looked at the elder in surprise. He smiled and said, something has happened. What's so big that Brother Tsangqiong has to come out personally? The Dharma Supreme was surprised, and so was Wu Jueqing. This was because this old man was the stabilizing force of the Zhuge clan. The first-generation ancestor, the origin tribulation, the founder of the Zhuge clan, single-handedly led the Zhuge clan to power. Ancestor. Zhuge Tsangqiong. The elder ancestors of the various clans would never come out unless it was a matter of life and death. Who would have thought that today's tremor would actually make the most stable Zhuge Tsangqiong of the various clans come out? How could the Dharma Supreme not be surprised? Something big has happened. Zhuge Tsangqiong's expression was grave. Lord Dharma Supreme, the spirit vein in the ancestral tomb of the Zhuge clan has suddenly broken. It has been completely extracted. The Tianqing feng shui inside. The coiled dragon jade belt has also suddenly broken. Not a single drop of the fate energy of the past 10,000 years is left. There's actually such a thing? Even with the Dharma Supreme's almost unparalleled composure, he couldn't help but stand up abruptly. An extremely shocked expression appeared on his face. Wu Jueqing's eyebrows also twitched violently a few times. Zhuge Tsangqiong looked at the Dharma Supreme's expression and said slowly, Lord Dharma Supreme must know the reason behind this? The Dharma Supreme laughed bitterly and said, that's right. The fate energy of the various clans. It has been passed down for 10,000 years. Not even a single drop is left. Such a situation has also happened in the past 10,000 years. He said word by word, that was when the Tribulation Sword Master killed his way up to the upper three heavens. Such a situation will only happen after a large clan is annihilated. The situation. The population is wiped out and the earth veins collapse. But when a large clan like this is still at its peak, suddenly there is no fate energy left. This has never happened in the past 10,000 years. Besides, the Tribulation Sword Master has obviously only obtained the fourth fragment. He definitely doesn't have the ability to extract or destroy everyone's fate energy. The fate energy of the clan. Such a thing can only happen after the Tribulation Sword Master has at least obtained the eighth fragment. Kinship. The three of them looked at each other and saw the seriousness in each other's eyes. Wu Jueqing said slowly, could it be that this is a flawless smokescreen? Zhuge Tsangqiong took a deep breath and said, Lord Dharma Supreme, please contact the other clans. Large clans had always been in contact. But if it was the fastest to send a message, and it was the Dharma Supreme's communication jade, Zhuge Tsangqiong was also extremely smart. When the Dharma Supreme said that, he thought of the other clans. If there was only the Zhuge clan, then the matter must have happened in Tianji City. And it might not be too serious, but if all the large clans encountered such a thing at the same time, then there was only one possibility. And that was, the Tribulation Sword Master has already been killed. He has gone up to the upper three heavens. And he has at least obtained the eighth fragment of the Tribulation Sword. This is impossible. Wu Jueqing said with certainty, the fact that the Tribulation Sword Master has obtained the eighth fragment is pure nonsense. No. He has obtained the sword intent, but he can't even obtain the fifth fragment. Even if he did, it would still be a dead fragment. How could he have obtained the eighth fragment? The Dharma Supreme hurriedly took out his communication jade and prepared to send a message to ask. However, before he could send out the question, his communication jade suddenly glowed brightly. One message after another. They appeared on the communication jade. Looks like things are not good. The Dharma Supreme laughed bitterly. Wu Jueqing and Zhuge Tsangqiong both leaned over to take a look. Just looking at the first message, both of their expressions changed. The Yi clan ancestral grave has been destroyed. Earth meridians destroyed. Spirit meridians all gone. Fate energy all gone. This was the first message. There was almost no need to look at the other messages. They could be sure that the other messages were exactly the same as this one. It was just that the surname was changed. Looks like the large clans were all in trouble. The Dharma Supreme's expression was extremely dark. Wu Jueqing's expression was also dark, his eyes flashing. Zhuge Tsangqiong stood still for a moment before he said calmly, I'll go back and deal with it. As he said that, he turned and walked out. At the door, he stopped and said word by word, looks like our large clans must make peace with the Tribulation Sword Master this time. His tribulation will not rest until he is dead. He must kill tribulation and extract fate energy to continue the clan's legacy. Otherwise, the extinction of the large clans is right in front of us. With that, he strode away without looking back. The Dharma Supreme took a deep breath and said, "Brother Wu, what do you think?" Wu Jueqing's eyes flashed. When Zhuge Zhangqiong was far away, he said in a low voice, "It might not be the doing of the Tribulation Sword Master. As Tribulations, you and I should know that the Tribulation Sword Master probably doesn't have such capabilities now. Could it be the medicine banquet?" Chapter 1096. Wu Jueqing smiled lightly and said, "However, even if this was not done by the Tribulation Sword Master, it is also a good thing that the big clans want to fight to the death with the Tribulation Sword Master. So, don't expose it." The Dharma Supreme smiled. "Brother Wu, you worry too much." Zhuge Zhangqiong also didn't say that this was the doing of the Tribulation Sword Master. However, no matter who is behind this, the fate energy that has been lost cannot be recovered. The only way is to extract it from tribulation. Only then can fate continue. That is why there is the saying of extracting fate energy against the heavens. Because even if it is the will of the heavens, as long as the fate energy of tribulation is extracted, it can still be continued. Wu Jueqing was stunned. He said, "Yes, I have been a villain for nothing." As he spoke, he laughed. "Let's go." The Dharma Supreme smiled lightly. The two of them, one in black and one in white, floated out of the door at the same time. The Dharma Supreme directly rose into the air and slowly left like a black cloud. Wu Jueqing, on the other hand, turned around and melted into the world of ice and snow, disappearing without a trace. He still used the method of concealing his tracks and went forward stealthily. The two of them were still one in the light and one in the dark. After all, there was still that unfathomable expert in the city. How would Wu Jueqing dare to let his guard down? The medicine banquet. The high priest was focused on the huge lotus above Chu Yang's head. The fate energy from all directions was still gathering. The lotus had already started to slowly change color, from the pure white to blue and now towards red. Once the colors changed and turned back into a colorless white, the heaven-nourishing jade could be refined. At this critical juncture, the sound of the wind suddenly came. A voice outside said, "Lord Dharma Supreme, no one is allowed to enter during the medicine banquet." A slow voice said, "No matter, I am here to pay a visit to the high priest and the valley master. There are some matters regarding the medicine banquet that I need to ask." The supreme martial artist guarding the door said, "Please wait for a moment, Lord Dharma Supreme. I will go and report." The high consecrator heard it clearly and was instantly enraged. He stormed out angrily. "What's the matter?" The moment the high priest came out, he asked the Dharma Supreme. His nose was not his nose and his eyes were not his eyes. His expression was extremely ugly. For the medicine banquet this time around, one of the large clans was chased back by the Dharma Supreme, and thus became 8. The Ling clan was eliminated and thus became 7. There were also 2 pharmacists from the law enforcement officers, but just like the other 7 clans, they cheated and substituted one for another. But now, even his body had stiffened. The medicine banquet was almost ruined. The high priest had a belly full of anger. If he didn't vent it on the Dharma Supreme, who else could he vent it on? At this moment, the valley master of the medicine valley also hurriedly came out from the great heaven reversing array. Frowning, he asked, "Lord Dharma Supreme, what's the matter?" The Dharma Supreme was not angered by these two people's provocation. Instead, he smiled and said, "I am here to ask if the medicine banquet's extraction of fortune from the pharmacists will affect the fortune of the big clans?" "Nonsense. Nonsense." The high priest and the valley master opened their mouths to refute at the same time, spitting out so much saliva that it almost washed the Dharma Supreme's face. Firstly, it's used to absorb alchemists' luck and gather them to overturn the heavens. It's not extracted. The valley master said with a solemn face, "After the medicine banquet, this portion of luck will still have to be returned." Secondly, the medicine banquet, from a certain perspective, is for the benefit of the big clans. How can it affect the big clans? Thirdly, when the array was set up, the medicine valley only provided the array blueprint. The array was completely completed by the big clans and law enforcement officers. Whether or not the fortune of the big clans will be extracted, how can we, the medicine valley, decide? Even if we do, it's the big clans seeking their own deaths. Fourthly, if the Dharma Supreme does not believe, you can check the array. The valley master said firmly, "Lord Dharma Supreme also has the array blueprint. If you find any flaws in the array, please go and settle the score with the person who set up the array." The Dharma Supreme smiled bitterly. "I'm just asking. I would also like to ask Lord Dharma Supreme. The high priest had already lost his patience. The people sent by the big clans and law enforcement officers have all used the soul transfer technique. I wonder what Lord Dharma Supreme thinks about this matter? The Dharma Supreme's gaze instantly turned sharp. There's actually such a thing? How dare they? The high priest sneered. The medicine banquet this time was almost ruined by these greedy people. I don't know who was the one who ate too much lard and lost his mind. With his short-sighted eyes, he came up with such an idiotic idea and did such a despicable thing that could end one's bloodline. They should implicate their entire clan and deserve to die. Lord Dharma Supreme, please investigate thoroughly. The Dharma Supreme's temples twitched. He glared at the high priest and said furiously, "What a bastard! I will definitely investigate to the bottom." With that, he left in a huff and said, "Let me see if there are any flaws in the array." He left hurriedly. The Valley Master looked at the high priest and both of them smiled at each other. He sent a telepathic message, "How does it feel to scold the Dharma Supreme to his face?" The high priest's anger dissipated completely. His old face smiled like a chrysanthemum and he nodded vigorously. Great. Both of them were not fools. Who else could command the law enforcement officers and the big clans at the same time other than the Dharma Supreme? Now, the high priest pointed at the monk and scolded him as a bald donkey, venting his anger. The Dharma Supreme walked one round around the array and did not find anything unusual. He stood at the top and observed for a while, but also did not find anything wrong. He directly disrupted his divine sense and used his original divine sense to check the fate energy, but did not find anything extracted from the big clans. He only saw that the fate energy of countless pharmacists in the world was converging here continuously. Every trace was very weak. The Dharma Supreme shook his head and finally landed. How is it? The high priest rolled his eyes and asked. There's no problem? The Dharma Supreme frowned. But the ancestral tombs of the big clans suddenly collapsed and no one was spared. The fate energy of all the clans was all gone. What is going on? There's such a thing? The high priest and the Valley Master looked at each other. Then the high priest said, "We don't know about that. Besides, this matter has nothing much to do with the Medicine Valley." "Oh right, Lord Dharma Supreme, the fate energy of the Medicine Valley has not been completely extracted, right?" The Dharma Supreme's gaze was deep. Such a thing did not happen to the Medicine Valley. That's good. That's good. The high priest and the Valley Master were beaming with joy, as if relieved of a heavy burden. The Dharma Supreme could not stay any longer and left in a huff. Inside, the two old men looked at each other and smiled. Both of them blew their beards loudly and laughed silently, winking at each other happily. The great heaven-turning array. A cloud of mist. Wu Jueqing's white figure suddenly appeared under Chu Yang's stone pillar. Looking up at the huge lotus above, he murmured, "The fate energy lotus is almost complete. If it is destroyed now, the 1,000-year plan will be ruined in an instant." She frowned and floated up to Chu Yang. Then she looked at Chu Yang's face. There was pain on Chu Yang's face. There were also faint 7 colors, gathering and dispersing at times. However, they did not completely disperse nor did they completely gather. Wu Jueqing was puzzled. It was obvious that he was poisoned and had not been cured. However, it had already greatly delayed and controlled the poison. What was the reason? He saw that Chu Yang was holding a small jade bottle with a purple crystal core in his hands. Could the reason be from this small bottle? Wu Jueqing frowned. The jade bottle with the purple crystal core opened silently. A fresh fragrance came out from inside. It actually had the rhythm of life. No wonder you could temporarily cure my poison. So you have the spiritual spring water in you? Wu Jueqing was relieved. He actually smiled slightly and murmured, "Since it's not the Tribulation Sword Master, it seems like I can only deal with it after the medicine banquet." With a flash, he disappeared without a trace. Wu Jueqing had already left for a while. Chu Yang's eyes were still closed, but a thin layer of sweat had quietly seeped out of his forehead. He did not expect this guy to really come. This situation was really dangerous. If not for the fact that the medicine banquet was to deal with the Tribulation Sword Master, he would probably have turned into dust with just a casual slap. Wu Jueqing had just left when the high priest and the Valley Master came in and looked at the lotus above Chu Yang's head from afar. Both of them looked solemn. It had already changed to the 5th color. "Are the preparations almost done?" asked the Valley Master. "Almost done." The high priest's face was solemn and serious. "When it changes to the 8th color and has enough fate energy, we can activate the ultimate form of the Great Heaven-Turning Formation. We can draw in the primordial energy and gather the 1,000-year fate energy of the pharmacist to start refining medicine. At that time, all the supreme martial artists will need to come in and do it at the same time. They will be divided into batches and throw 810,000 elixirs into the lotus. The lotus will change color again and become the lotus of heavenly mandate. At the last moment, you and I will use the momentum to stir the elixirs and gather the power of fate energy. The lotus of heavenly mandate will immediately react and merge with the heaven and earth. It will adjust yin and yang and gather the wind and clouds. Then we can refine the heaven-nourishing jade. The Valley Master nodded deeply and let out a long breath. The medicine banquet this time is finally a success. The process is really unbearable to look back on. The high priest snorted and said, "This time it's all thanks to Chu Yang. Valley Master, can't you see that he is still poisoned at this moment? He is using his willpower to support himself and not collapse. We must thank him properly for this success." The Valley Master nodded. "Of course." Then he said, "Since the outcome is decided, I can now go out and announce that the champion of the medicine banquet is Chu Yang." The high priest didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Everyone else is dead. If he is not the champion, who else can it be? The Valley Master laughed and turned to leave. Both of them were relaxed at this moment, but they knew very well that the danger of this medicine banquet had completely exceeded the sum of the previous 1,000 years. But some things couldn't be said openly after all. Outside, the snow was still falling. On the ground, there was another thick layer of snow on top of the foundation of the original snow. But there were still many people looking forward to the final announcement of the champion. The voice of the Valley Master of the Medicine Valley rang out at this moment. The finals of the medicine banquet have come to an end. The champion of this year's medicine banquet, the #1 pharmacist in the world, is... Chapter 1097. The voice of the Valley Master of the Medicine Valley spread far and wide, and even the snowflakes fluttering in the air turned into powder. Ah! Wah! A red shadow jumped up happily from afar, dancing and somersaulting on the top of a big tree. Chu Yang succeeded. Wah! Amo Qingwu was extremely happy. Her beloved brother Chu Yang won the medicine banquet that all the pharmacists in the heavens competed for. Amo Qingwu was even happier than becoming a supreme martial artist herself. For a moment, the little girl was so happy that her heart was about to explode. She grabbed Bu Liuqing's sleeve and laughed and jumped. Master Chu Yang succeeded. He succeeded. Bu Liuqing narrowed his eyes and wanted to say something. But he rolled his eyes and said, "How did it become Chu Yang? Not brother Chu Yang?" Amo Qingwu was embarrassed. "Master, you're so annoying." She stomped her feet and turned around. But she still couldn't help but feel happy. After being shy for a while, she cheered again. In the other direction, Han Xiaoran laughed heartily and was extremely happy. The Southeast law enforcement officers could finally hold their heads high this time. Some people were happy while others were frustrated. Chu Yang won the championship, and the big clans were all a little unhappy. Especially a few elders who were even more nervous. Chu Yang won the championship, which meant that a part of the heaven-nourishing jade would fall into his hands. That was a good item that could reverse life and death. The 8-second grandmasters sighed at the same time and turned to leave in the wind and snow. They were ready to take action. If they really couldn't do it, then they could only kill Chu Yang and ambush Zi Sheqing together? In the heaven-turning array, the lotus on top of Chu Yang's head was already faintly turning yellow. Yellow was the 8th color. The 9th color was pink. After pink it was white. The high priest stared at the lotus above Chu Yang's head without blinking. He held his breath and clenched his fists tightly. He was waiting for the moment when it turned yellow to activate its ultimate form. At this moment, the high priest only felt his heart thumping and his mouth dry. Finally, the color of the lotus suddenly turned yellow. The high priest couldn't help but be excited. He shouted with a red face, "Open!" He gave the order. All the supreme martial artists outside attacked together. They all slammed their palms into the ground. This palm strike was different from any other palm strike. Instead, it was formed purely from the life energy of the Supremes. Even the snowflakes on the uppermost layer did not tremble when the palm struck the ground. However, the vigorous power had already silently gathered underground. Then, it abruptly converged together, converging at a certain point underground. That point was where the ultimate eye of the formation was located. In an instant, an illusory, pure white lotus flower slowly bloomed from an unknown location underground and slowly rose up, the High Consecrator leaped and arrived in front of Chu Yang. He reminded him in a low voice, "Chu Yang, release all your defenses and prepare to draw the primordial energy into your body. Refine the heaven-nourishing jade." Chu Yang nodded heavily. Then he let go of all his defenses, with the power of heaven and earth to clear the top. The next moment, that huge lotus floated up from the ground and dispersed into nothingness. It then fused with the lotus on top of Chu Yang's head with a schwa sound. The lotus on top of Chu Yang's head issued a slight trembling sound, and suddenly doubled in size. Then the lotus turned from yellow to pink. From the heart of the lotus, 3 streams of blazing white aura suddenly shot out. They broke through the formation and spiraled into the sky, turning into an inseparable stream that rushed into the clouds. The white light disappeared without a trace. Then, a mysterious chant sounded in the sky, as if it came from the deepest part of everyone's heart. The chant became louder and louder, more and more intense. In the end, it finally filled the whole world. Just at the peak, it suddenly stopped. At the same time, a purple aura, mysterious, ancient and powerful, appeared. From the clouds far away, it broke through the snowflakes and fell straight into the heaven-turning formation. It connected the heaven and earth tightly. Waves of mysterious aura were aimed at the top of Chu Yang's head and rushed down fiercely. "It's coming, it's coming." The sword spirit was fully focused. He held the calamity sword in his hand, ready to intercept this purple spiritual energy at any time. This was the most original source of energy in the whole world. The source of all life. It was already a shocking move that the medicine banquet could be brought down. It was impossible to intercept it. No one could absorb such a vast amount of energy in the form of a human body. It could only return to the sky after the medicine banquet, which was equivalent to a trip to the human world. But the sword spirit was different. The sword spirit did not belong to the human body, the heavenly Tao and the netherworld. And the calamity sword in his hand was even more mysterious and powerful. Together with Chu Yang, the sword master, the sword spirit had the right to intercept this primordial violet vapor. Although it was still a little risky, the sword spirit would definitely not let go of such an opportunity. This was really a blessing from the heavens. Letting it go was a sin. The purple spiritual energy surged into his head. Chu Yang only felt that his spirit and consciousness were being cleansed at the same time. His whole body was ironed, as if he was soaking in a hot spring when he was exhausted to the extreme. Wherever the purple aura passed, countless small black stains appeared on the surface of Chu Yang's skin. Those were the impurities in his body. Under the cleansing of such purple aura, all of it was expelled. If not for the calamity sword, the cleansing of his body and the removal of impurities would have been the greatest benefit this number 1 pharmacist had. The purple aura entered his body. The next moment, the sword spirit started to get busy. He suddenly let go of the calamity sword. The calamity sword scattered into scattered light and entered Chu Yang's meridians. The sword spirit sat down cross-legged and attached all his spirit power to the calamity sword that had already entered Chu Yang's meridians. The next moment, the surging primordial violet vapor swept over from the top of Chu Yang's head with an overwhelming force. His meridians immediately turned into an overwhelming wave of violet vapor. The calamity sword trembled slightly, as if an extremely thirsty person had jumped into a clear and sweet lake and gulped it down. The sword spirit's spirit power was constantly channeled, constantly extracting the violet vapor that the calamity sword had swallowed and pouring it into the calamity space. The speed of the movement was so fast that it could be channeled back and forth dozens of times in an instant. It was like a rat in a huge oil depot diligently and tirelessly stealing soybean oil from its rat hole. Furthermore, the opportunity could not be missed. At this moment, the sword spirit was using all his strength to steal crazily. The result of such a theft was that the primordial violet vapor entered Chu Yang's head and went down in order. It should have circled around his body and entered the huge lotus of heavenly mandate from the gushing spring. It should have ripened and completed the refinement of the heaven-nourishing jade. However, the sword spirit's desperate theft actually caused the primordial violet vapor to not leak out for a long time. The high priest stared intently at the lotus of heavenly mandate and observed the progress of the primordial violet vapor. After seeing no reaction for a long time, he couldn't help but feel strange. What's going on? Why is the primordial violet vapor so slow this time? The old man muttered to himself. Everything was happening inside Chu Yang's body. Even with his fiery golden eyes, the high priest couldn't see it. Who would have thought that the hard work of him, the big clans and law enforcement officers for 1,000 years would be used by someone in secret? The sword spirit was desperately stealing the violet vapor. However, there was really too much of such spiritual energy. After a short while, after it got used to Chu Yang's meridians, it completely drowned the Calamity Sword and the Sword Spirit in purple waves. The Calamity Sword and the Sword Spirit were like reefs sinking to the bottom of a crazy tide. Above their heads, the violet vapor flowed past, endlessly. The Sword Spirit maintained a high speed of theft. It displayed a theft technique that even Rui Butong's two famous teachers would be shocked to death. It kept extracting, circulating, putting down, returning, again, 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 again. Above Chu Yang's head, the primordial violet vapor was crazily pouring down. Finally, Chu Yang felt a heat in the soles of his feet. Two streams of violet vapor poured out from the soles of his feet and poured into the lotus of heavenly mandate. It's finally out. The high priest looked at the violet vapor and finally heaved a sigh of relief. Damn it, it's even more difficult than a woman giving birth. The violet vapor poured into the lotus of heavenly mandate endlessly. The lotus instantly turned completely pink. Then it slowly turned pure white petal by petal. The high priest clapped his hands and shouted, "All of you come in." At his command, 10 supreme martial artists came in at the same time. "Don't move. Everyone guard a pile of herbs and listen to my command." The high priest was so nervous that he was stuttering. He stared at the lotus of heavenly mandate. As every petal of the lotus turned pure white, his mouth opened wider and wider. At this moment he didn't even have the time to breathe. The next moment, the primordial violet vapor poured in. The last lotus petal turned pure white. The entire lotus suddenly emitted a dazzling holy white light. Then it started to spin slowly. Slowly it spun faster and faster. Slowly the shape of the lotus could no longer be seen clearly. Swoosh. All the pharmacist's fate energy entered the lotus petal in an orderly manner at this moment. "Do it." Under extreme nervousness, the high priest's voice became that of a duck. He gave the order like a chicken waiting to be slaughtered. The 10 supreme martial artists lifted the piles of spirit herbs beside them at the same time. They rose into the air and were about to throw them into the rapidly spinning lotus. After putting them in, they immediately came down and picked up another pile. They did this a few times. All 81 types of spirit herbs entered the lotus of heavenly mandate. Not even a single bubble appeared. Furthermore, it seemed to have completely disappeared. The lotus flashed. At this moment, the colors changed back and forth continuously. It was as if a huge neon light was spinning in the sky. A strong fragrance spread out fiercely. The lotus of heavenly mandate was finally completed. Chapter 1098. The Valley Master and High Priest flew above the lotus and focused their attention on the direction of the lotus. The next moment, the two of them shouted in unison and struck out with their white rods. The two of them stood opposite each other in the air. As the lotus of heavenly mandate rotated, their bodies also rotated and instantly turned into two shadows. The space of tribulation was already filled with purple energy. The dense purple chi seemed to have condensed into a substance. At this moment, all the medicinal herbs seemed to have been reborn as they grew rapidly. The spiritual spring water gurgled and actually started to turn into a faint milky white color. The white spiritual energy in the space of tribulation was first compressed and then directly expelled, disappearing without a trace. The entire space of tribulation became a heaven of purple energy. And the sword spirit was still tirelessly moving it here, continuously moving it here, in the air above the lotus of heavenly mandate. The Valley Master and High Priest were already dizzy from the rotation and were trying their best. The two old men were extremely puzzled. What's going on? In the past, the heaven-nourishing jade would be formed after 100 rounds in 8,000 years. Why is it that after more than 3,000 rounds this time, the heaven-nourishing jade is still not formed? This is really, really strange. How could the two of them know that originally, it would at most take a few hundred rounds this time? But the problem was that there was an extra super thief. Almost 1/3 of the primordial purple vapor was taken away. The power of heaven and earth was seriously insufficient. They could only use time to make up for it. And using time to make up for it, the two old men were rotated a little more. Not just a little more but a lot more. Finally, the primordial purple vapor above Chu Yang's head slowly weakened, in the center of the lotus. Then, a sparkling and translucent object was slowly lifted up from the ground. Slowly, it reached a height of 10 feet above the lotus. It was like jade but not jade. It was like substance but not substance. It was like liquid but not liquid. All in all, Chuyang felt that it was somewhat similar to the mysterious ice jade ointment of the great miracle medicine. However, it was much, much more powerful than the mysterious ice jade ointment. The next moment, the lotus of heavenly mandate suddenly disappeared and turned into a rainbow light. He had entered this strange place. Then this strange object suddenly emitted a bright light. It lit up the entire hall. The heaven-nourishing jade was finally formed. It slowly floated in the air. In the sky, the purple gas from the top to the bottom suddenly disappeared. A cloud of dense purple chi separated from the heaven-nourishing jade. It was as if it was escaping, moving at lightning speed. Battered and exhausted, he rushed out of the hall and disappeared into the boundless void. This is too frightening. Damn, there's actually someone here who's waiting to take us in? The high priest and the valley lord fell to the ground at the same time with a thud. The two old men shook their heads and felt dizzy for a long time before they came back to their senses. He was really dizzy. The high priest stood up, but he still felt dizzy as he walked around in a circle. He sat down on the ground again, panting heavily. Holding his head, he cursed, "Damn it, it's really evil this time. I was spun around 13,000 times. Even with my supreme martial artist cultivation, my head almost exploded from the spinning." The valley master smiled bitterly, supporting himself with one hand. She tried her best to endure the dizziness and nausea. Panting, she said, You're still counting?" The high priest spat and said, "How can I not count? Valley Lord, if you do this again next time, let second brother do it. I won't do it even if you beat me to death. If I do it again, I'll definitely lose my life." The valley master laughed. The two of them calmed down. Finally they stood up and could raise their heads. Looking at the spinning heaven-nourishing jade, the valley master sighed. The heaven-nourishing jade this time is completely perfect. It was incomparably perfect, and why was it so big? It's more than twice as big as the previous ones. The high priest also looked at it and frowned. It's big indeed. Why do I feel like it's only half complete? Missing half? It's always a full circle. Why is it missing half this time? It's only a semicircle? I really don't know about that. But although it's a semicircle this time, it's enough. The valley master said with relief, "Quickly let this little brother come down. Go and cut the heaven-nourishing jade. Leave the part that's used to nourish the heavens and leave a small piece for the valley lord. The rest are all for Chuyang. This is the rule for nourishing the heavens." The high priest was a little reluctant. Giving him so much. This little guy is so lucky. This is what they deserve. The valley lord said solemnly. The high priest smiled embarrassedly. "I'm just kidding, in a place that no one knew about in the tribulation space. Good stuff, good stuff." The sword spirit held the semicircle lovingly. Although he was so tired that he was panting, he was beaming with joy. If the valley master and the high priest saw this, they would definitely be shocked. The thing in the sword spirit's hands was the heaven-nourishing jade. Exactly half of it. Even Chuyang didn't know how the sword spirit managed to cut half of the heaven-nourishing jade in front of everyone. At this moment he was asking in the tribulation space. The moment Chuyang entered the tribulation space, what greeted him was the almost liquid-like primordial violet vapor. He choked and almost couldn't breathe. The purple energy was so pure that it made Chuyang choke on his breath. It was as if he had suddenly swallowed a mouthful of sticky rice and stuffed his windpipe. Cough, cough, cough. Chuyang was shocked. So much primordial violet vapor? The sword spirit said proudly, "When you were performing the empowerment, I stole it. Halfway through, I stole enough violet vapor to improve the tribulation space and completely change its nature. But to be on the safe side, I stole half more. With so much violet vapor, it would be a waste not to steal it." Chuyang fainted. No wonder I felt that the violet vapor empowerment didn't have any other benefits other than expelling impurities. Chuyang said impatiently, "So you stole it all here? You still want to absorb it directly?" The sword spirit looked at Chuyang as if he was looking at an alien. "Aren't you afraid that you'll explode?" Chuyang rubbed his nose. "What's going on?" He pointed at the heaven-nourishing jade. "How did you cut it?" Chuyang was extremely surprised. The sword spirit snorted and said, "Isn't this a piece of cake? Now that I'm moving at full speed, even the Dharma Supreme may not be able to catch my shadow. How did you see it?" After bragging for a while, he said, "The moment the heaven-nourishing jade was formed and the violet vapor dissipated, I made my move." The sword spirit hugged the heaven-nourishing jade tiredly and snorted. How can the heaven-nourishing jade refined by the tribulation sword master not even have half of it? That's too easy for them. With this piece of jade, so many lives will be saved. After he finished speaking, only then did he carry the heaven-nourishing jade and place it beside the divine bone golden hand. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. Outside, the high consecrator soared into the air. Hugging the heaven-nourishing jade in his arms, he descended slowly. Just this hug already made him feel comfortable all over. The Valley Master flew up personally and came to Chu Yang's side. He said gently, "Brother Chu, the refining of the heaven-nourishing jade has been completed. You can rest for a while. At the same time, this old man will take a look at how to get rid of your poison." Chu Yang was interrogating the sword spirit when he heard this. He hurriedly returned his consciousness to his body and said, "Thank you, Valley Master." The Valley Master was afraid that Chu Yang would be affected after being poisoned. He directly carried him and floated down. With a face full of gratitude he said, "You've worked hard." Then he diagnosed the 7 shades poison in Chu Yang's body. He frowned and said, "Brother Chu, this poison of yours, although it is temporarily suppressed, however it is still a serious problem. If you use the heaven-nourishing jade to absorb it, it will be a little overkill. Let me slowly think of a way." Chu Yang revealed a generous smile and said, "The heaven-nourishing jade has a great responsibility. For the heavens, for all living beings in the world, for the common people, and for the fortune of all the pharmacists in the past 1,000 years. The heaven-nourishing jade should be kept for greater use." The Valley Master was filled with deep veneration. Little brother is indeed chivalrous. Such a character does not disgrace the title of #1 pharmacist in the world. Chu Yang said fearfully, "I was just lucky. In terms of pharmacology, I am far inferior to the Valley Master and the High Priest. Such an honor. How can I dare to accept it?" The Valley Master admired him more and more. Such a pure and flawless young hero. No matter what, he had to get close to him. He said, "Little brother, since you are the first and have successfully cultivated the heaven-nourishing jade, you are fully deserving of this title. Not only that, from today onwards, you are the Medicine Valley's High Priest. You are ranked 7th High Priest." As he said, he took out a jade token. "Brother Chu, this is your identity token. As long as you have this, you can enter and leave the Medicine Valley at will. You have the right to enjoy all the resources of the Medicine Valley." Chu Yang received it with a look of reverence and awe. At this moment, the High Priest finally came out. He held a purple crystal jade core plate with 5 palm-sized pieces of heaven-nourishing jade on it. He handed it to Chu Yang with some heartache. "Brother Chu, this is the heaven-nourishing jade you deserve." Chu Yang was very honest. He said awkwardly, This is not good. Why don't the 3 of us divide it equally?" The High Priest was very happy at once. He patted Chu Yang's shoulder. "Nonsense, this belongs to you alone. The 2 of us did not do anything, why should we divide it equally? Besides, the Medicine Valley has its own reserves." If Chu Yang had accepted it without saying anything, the High Priest would inevitably be heartbroken. But now that Chu Yang said this, he immediately felt his heart warm up. Chu Yang looked awkwardly as the High Priest stuffed the heaven-nourishing jade into his arms. He spoke incoherently, his face red. "This is not good. This is not good." This expression was simply that of an innocent little virgin. The High Priest stuffed it into Chu Yang's arms without any explanation. Then he patted his shoulder. "Brother Chu, when you are done, you must come to the Medicine Valley for a visit." Chu Yang said sincerely, "Of course I must go." After giving some instructions, Chu Yang reluctantly took his leave, saying that he would think of a way to cure the poison and try not to use the heaven-nourishing jade as much as possible. The Valley Master urged him to come to the Medicine Valley for a visit. Then he explained some of the benefits of being the top pharmacist, including the status of a law enforcement officer and a doctor, which was equivalent to that of a law enforcement master. In short, all these benefits would be fulfilled after the heaven-nourishing jade core was repaid. Chu Yang beamed with joy as he agreed. Then he walked out in high spirits. Behind him, the High Priest and the Valley Master looked at his back view. They stroked their beards and sighed in relief. What a smart and sensible child. Little did they know that the person they had just sent away was the most black-hearted and the one who had benefited the most. In this way, almost 2/3 of the heaven-nourishing jade had fallen into Chu Yang's hands. Also, almost 1/3 of the primordial violet vapor had been taken by him. This small fortune that he had made in secret had already made him a little embarrassed. To be continued. Chapter 1099. When Chu Yang walked out of the sky-turning array, he still felt like he was in a dream. Outside it was snowing heavily. The entire world was a vast expanse. The dancing snowflakes hit Chu Yang's face, giving him a tranquil and ethereal feeling. He didn't use any martial arts, but just trudged out of the snow at the speed of an ordinary person. In such a hazy place, Chu Yang's mind was exceptionally clear. After thinking about what happened here, he recalled Mo Qingwu's strange dream, and that mysterious top talent in his previous life, Shui Leihan. There must be a connection, Chu Yang thought to himself. From afar, a few gazes looked at him at the same time. Bu Liuqing's eyes were like an eagle's, staring at Chu Yang, who was trudging through the snow. Even Bu Liuqing couldn't see clearly from a distance of 10,000 feet. He could only lock onto Chu Yang's position with his aura. Chu Yang got first place. Now that he came out, it proved that he had the heaven-nourishing jade. There would definitely be people who wanted the heaven-nourishing jade. Therefore, Chu Yang was in a very dangerous situation now. On the other side, Feng Yuro and Yu Lingxue stood side by side in the snow. Their expressions were somewhat complicated. The heaven-nourishing jade has finally been refined. Feng Yuro seemed to be mumbling to herself. Yes. Yu Lingxue's handsome face flashed with a trace of solemnity. For 100,000 years, all the Dharma Supremes have given their all in order to assist the Tribulation Sword Master. If the seniors knew that only the two of us are left among the law enforcement officers, and the rest have already given up on this goal, how would they feel? How would they feel? Will they cry at the same time? But no matter what, we have to adhere to Master's wishes. Master's last instructions before he died were to uphold the mission of the law enforcement officers and assist the Tribulation Sword Master to make this continent peaceful. Feng Yuro smiled and said in the wind and snow. The nourishing of the heavens will begin 3 days later. Yu Lingxue looked up and removed his defense, letting the cold snowflakes stick to his face. Feeling the chill, he said, "We will take action at that time." He paused and said in a heavy tone, "It's also possible for us. This battle will be the last battle." Are you scared?" Feng Yuro took a deep breath. She looked at her husband gently and said with a hint of guilt, "I'm not afraid. It's just that, what I regret the most is that I couldn't leave behind a male and female bloodline for you." Yu Lingxue smiled. "Even if it's Sun Wandai. But many years later they all returned to dust." Look, there are many people in this world with many surnames. However, after 100,000 years, there are already many surnames. It could no longer be seen on this continent. Because they don't have daughters, or perhaps they only have daughters and no sons. Once they marry, they follow their husbands. Thus, they don't have the surname of their maiden family. Only large clans can pass it down. But slowly, as the world changes, large clans will also disappear. Yu Lingxue said indifferently, "So what if he disappeared? Now it's gone. Even if they disappeared after tens of millions of years, they would still disappear. The death of a person was like the extinguishment of a lamp. Even if there was another world, it no longer belonged to this place. Why bother?" Feng Yuro listened in a daze. Her eyes reddened. "I didn't think so much. I just want to have a child of my own." Yu Lingxue heaved a long sigh and said, "If we don't die today, you will have a child." The two of them leaned against each other. Feng Yuro slowly snuggled into her husband's arms and remained silent. She enjoyed the peace and quiet before the great battle. Chu Yang walked out step by step. Another 300 feet and he would be out of the Medicine Valley's perimeter. Around him there was a strong aura. Those were the experts of the large clans preparing to strike. Chu Yang was long prepared for this. A mocking smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "I know what you want to do. But if I can't even think of this if you succeed, then what am I doing?" Somewhere far away, a long roar suddenly sounded, breaking through the air. The wind and snow were shattered from the air. The wind and snow in front suddenly rumbled. A white figure like a hurricane galloped over in the wind and snow. Its speed was as fast as the wind and lightning. Its entire body was wrapped in wind and snow. Its figure and face could not be seen clearly. In fact, no aura was emitted. Before anyone could react, this white figure was already 300 feet in front of Chu Yang. Far away. Bu Liuqing shouted in shock and anger, "Not good." Suddenly he kicked off and his body shot out like an arrow. In the air he roared, "How dare you, coward!" Sword light shot out wildly from his hands. It formed a huge light sword that could cut through heaven and earth, flying through the air. Help Chu Yang. Yu Lingxue and Feng Yuro also realized that something was wrong and attacked at the same time. But that white figure was really too fast. Just as they reacted, that white figure was already in front of Chu Yang. It let out a long roar and laughed loudly. "Heaven-nourishing jade. It's mine. Bam. Chu Yang flew out without any strength to fight back. That person's palm was like a ravine, grabbing Chu Yang's clothes. With a tug, Chu Yang's clothes were torn to shreds. It seemed as if many things had fallen out of Chu Yang's clothes. That person used his hand to catch them. Without slowing down, he shot up into the sky. A blurry white figure flashed in the air and disappeared. A hearty laughter shook the heavens and disappeared into the distance. Two figures, one black and one white, chased after him from two different directions. They were the Dharma Supreme and Wu Jueqing. The two of them had been paying attention for a long time. When they saw such a situation and the fact that the white-robed person was unfamiliar, there was no such person in their memories, the two of them chased after him at the same time. If they could get the heaven-nourishing jade back, it would be theirs. Immediately, the furious Bu Luqing and Yu Lingxue chased after him with all their might. Pfft! Wah! Only then did Chu Yang fall into the snow. There was a sweet taste in his throat and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He lay on the snow, trembling all over. His face was pale and bloodless. Feng Yuro landed beside him with a swoosh. She immediately took his pulse and her expression relaxed. Thank goodness. I just wanted to snatch something. At this moment, a few figures landed at the same time. They looked at Chu Yang with complicated gazes. They were the supreme martial artist experts of the big clans. Chu Yang woke up and asked in a trembling voice, "What happened? Where's my heaven-nourishing jade? Where's my storage ring?" Feng Yuro sighed and said, "Brother Bu and the others have already gone after him. I hope they can get it back." Chu Yang was dazed. Who is that person? This question. It was also the question that everyone was most puzzled about. Who was that person? Judging from his speed just now, he was much faster than them. At the very least, he was also a supreme martial artist expert. What are you all doing here? Feng Yuro's face turned cold. Looking at the dozens of 7th-grade supreme martial artists of the big clans around her, her eyebrows gradually raised. She was already anxious and now this happened. Seeing these people again, she was really angry. Get lost. These people saw that Chu Yang's clothes were torn and he was almost naked. Even the ring on his finger was snatched away. There was also a big scratch. It must have been left behind when the ring was snatched away, it was obvious. Now Chu Yang couldn't hide anything on his body. It looked like they had all been robbed. Since that was the case, everyone was relieved. How could they still be interested in staying here and looking at Feng Yuro's face? They apologized one after another. In an instant, everyone left without a trace. All of them were gloating to the extreme. Who asked you to be so awesome? You deserved it. You were robbed. How satisfying, haha. The Valley Master and the High Priest hurried over. What's going on? Chu Yang said dejectedly, robbed? The heaven-nourishing jade is gone. The Valley Master and the High Priest sighed deeply. A red shadow flashed and Mo Qingwu anxiously squeezed in. Chu Yang, you, does it hurt? The little girl's face was full of worry. She moved closer to Chu Yang and inquired about his well-being. At this moment, she was actually infinitely gentle. It's okay. As long as you're fine. The heaven-nourishing jade is nothing, it's okay. She didn't sound like Chu Yang was older than her. Instead, it sounded like she was much older than Chu Yang. Chu Yang smiled bitterly and held her little hand. I'm fine, as long as you're fine. Mo Qingwu said gently, in my heart, the heaven-nourishing jade can't even compare to a strand of your hair. As she said, she smiled easily. In her smile, there was too much comfort and a calming power. Feng Yuro looked at Mo Qingwu. She sighed in her heart. This girl may be young, but this kind of understanding, this kind of consideration, this kind of devotion. Chanchan's identity is a little awkward. I'm afraid I really can't compete with her for anything. Bu Luqing and Yu Lingxue gave chase together. Bu Liuqing's cultivation was high. Riding on the sword light, he left Yu Lingxue behind almost as soon as he started. But Yu Lingxue had always been fast. He actually followed behind and caught up quickly. Both of them were furious. It was too embarrassing. 3 peak-level supreme martial artists were guarding here and someone actually robbed them right in front of them. This made both of them feel ashamed. But there was also a deep doubt in their hearts. Who exactly is this person? This person's cultivation is a little too scary. They rushed hundreds of miles in one breath. There was no trace left in front of them. Bu Luqing and Yu Lingxue stopped in their tracks. They couldn't catch up. A deep anger rose from their hearts. Both of them were livid and didn't speak. In front of them, 2 figures returned empty-handed. Seeing Bu Luqing and Yu Lingxue here, they seemed to pause for a moment and then came over. Dharma Supreme? Bu Luqing shouted. You did it? The extremely aggrieved supreme martial artist Bu was obviously trying to vent his anger on the Dharma Supreme, as if he couldn't catch the rabbit and cook the dog. The one coming over was the Dharma Supreme. Beside him there was a man in white. His robe was wide and his face couldn't be seen clearly. He was slightly behind the Dharma Supreme. He gave off a feeling that this person's status was lower than the Dharma Supreme's. To be continued? Chapter 1100. The Dharma Supreme smiled bitterly. If I really did it, it's understandable that Brother Bu wants to vent his anger on me. The problem is I didn't do it. And I am also chasing after that person. Bu Luqing saw that the Dharma Supreme was willing to put aside his pride to explain, so he was embarrassed to deliberately slander him. Because Bu Luqing had clearly seen the Dharma Supreme and this person in white chasing after him, he asked sullenly, "Who is this person?" "I didn't see clearly." The Dharma Supreme said solemnly, "The only thing I can be sure of is that this person's cultivation is definitely not below yours and mine. And his speed is even faster than yours and mine." Bu Luqing said angrily, "Nonsense. If he was not as fast as us, he would have been caught by you long ago. If he was not fast enough, we would have caught up with him long ago. You have been the Dharma Supreme for more than 10,000 years, are you so used to talking nonsense?" The Dharma Supreme was not angry. "Brother Bu, you know that I am telling the truth. I'm asking you, who is this person?" Bu Luqing asked angrily. "I don't know." The Dharma Supreme shook his head. "You don't know?" Bu Luqing and Yu Lingxue were shocked. The most powerful intelligence network in the world was in the hands of the Dharma Supreme. There was even information about every martial king in it. The law enforcement officer's database was cleared every 3 days. If there were any major changes, it would be reported to the Dharma Supreme immediately. All the information about supreme martial artists and above were cleared once a day and reported to the Dharma Supreme immediately. If even the Dharma Supreme did not know this person's background, then it was really mysterious. In the heavens there should not be such a person. The Dharma Supreme took a breath. In short, such a person should not exist. This is the most strange thing. Yes. This time even Bu Luqing nodded repeatedly. In this world, the so-called reclusive experts and peerless experts who could shock the world with a single move did not exist. Because when a person practiced martial arts, he would have to cultivate. After cultivating for a period of time, he would need to improve through battles regardless of technique. It was still a matter of comprehension. What one could comprehend in a life-and-death battle would always be much more than what one could comprehend alone. Could not be compared at all. The higher the level, the more so. Cultivating behind closed doors would never make one an expert. Not to mention becoming an expert like Bu Luqing. Therefore, as long as one was an expert, he would definitely be experienced in battles. This was the reason why martial artists broke the rules. But as long as this person had appeared on the continent, it would be impossible for him to escape. After the battle, the enforcers would have his information. Now, the Dharma Supreme said that there was absolutely no such thing. That meant, the identity of this person. It must be fake. Even if it's fake, it must be an expert. Bu Luqing said coldly, "Only law enforcers and big clans have such experts." This sentence, the Dharma Supreme did not refute. He was also doubting this possibility. If it was someone from a big clan or a law enforcement officer, then to the Dharma Supreme, this matter was even more important than Chuyang. Because this meant that in a certain aspect he had already lost control. It's possible. The Dharma Supreme nodded indifferently. Bu Luqing stared at him for a long while before he finally said in a deep voice, "Dharma Supreme, you are very weak today. Why do you keep agreeing with me?" The Dharma Supreme heaved a long sigh. Shaking his head, he smiled bitterly and said, "We were once brothers and good friends, but in these few days, we will immediately become mortal enemies. My heart is melancholy. I don't want to argue with people." His gaze was very complicated as he looked at Yu Lingxue, who was standing silently at one side, and said, "Brother Yu, there are a few words that I would like to talk to you about." Yu Lingxue also felt a little depressed and said, "That's right, I also want to talk to you." Bu Luqing's eyes flashed and he said indifferently, "Dharma Supreme. What can't be said here? Don't force me to reveal your biggest secret." The Dharma Supreme smiled indifferently. "If Brother Bu wants to reveal it, why wait until today? Brother Yu and I have been friends for more than 10,000 years. Don't tell me that before the battle of life and death, even the right to talk must be monitored by you? This sentence was said plainly, but the words were sharp. Bu Luqing did not give in and said, "But your conversation must be within my sight." Only he knew that the Dharma Supreme now was not Dongfang Badeo. It was a soul that vowed to take revenge. He was afraid that Yu Lingxue would be fooled, so he insisted. The Dharma Supreme smiled bitterly and said, "All right." Then he turned to Yu Lingxue and said, "Brother Yu, come over here with me." He took the lead and walked to one side. After drifting a few hundred feet, he stopped. Yu Lingxue's white clothes fluttered as he followed behind at a moderate pace. His brows were tightly knitted and his expression was deep and complicated. Snow filled the sky. At this moment, it was already difficult to see beyond 10 feet. After a few hundred feet there was no one at all. But his divine cognition could still lock on. Bu Luqing snorted. The Dharma Supreme was obviously using a trick. Under normal circumstances, a few hundred feet would naturally be within his sight. But in such heavy snow, how could he see? That man in white walked forward and smiled indifferently. "Brother Bu, let's talk?" Bu Luqing frowned and laughed coldly. "You are not the Dharma Supreme's assistant, are you?" The man in white laughed and said with interest, "Why do you think so?" Bu Luqing narrowed his eyes. "Wu Jueqing, don't play tricks in front of me. If you want to fight, I will keep you company. Even if you don't want to fight, I will still look for you to fight." The man in white was Wu Jueqing. He was surprised that Bu Luqing actually recognized him. He laughed and said, "Supreme martial artist Bu's temper is indeed as rumored. Very clever to actually be able to detect my aura?" Bu Luqing took a deep breath and said, "I didn't detect your aura when you hit it. However, you hit it too well. I, Bu Luqing, don't have much wisdom, but I have a heart of the sword." "Heart of the sword?" Wu Jueqing repeated and smiled suavely. "Brother Bu, after the Dharma Supreme nourishes the heavens, I will have a taste of your heart of the sword." Bu Luqing smiled coldly. "Teach me when the time comes." Wu Jueqing narrowed his eyes and said, "According to the time, Ning Tianya should have reached Tianji City by now. Why isn't he here yet?" Bu Luqing held his breath and looked at Wu Jueqing sharply. "What do you mean?" Wu Jueqing said indifferently, "The Dharma Supreme has gone to invite the Moon Breeze couple for a battle. After the Dharma Supreme nourishes the heavens, we will settle all our grievances. Brother Bu, a chance encounter is better than an invitation. Why don't we settle our karma then?" He smiled slightly. "Karma, with Ning Tianya?" Bu Luqing laughed viciously and said word by word, "What about Ning Tianya?" Wu Jueqing said indifferently, "After the Dharma Supreme nourishes the heavens, you will know." The sword intent on Bu Luqing's body surged and danced in the air. His gaze also turned into a long sword. "Wu Jueqing, fight with me now." Wu Jueqing shook his head. "It's not the time yet. When the time comes, we will settle all our grievances together. Let me see what capabilities this sword supremacy who is ranked number 1 in the world has to be called number 1 in the world." Bu Luqing nodded slowly and said, "You will see. You will see. I also want you to know that the names of Qin Feng and Lu Yun are not enough to scare people." Wu Jueqing's gaze also became sharp. "Is that so? The tribulation of the past is even less of a scare." Bu Luqing looked at him coldly and said, "Brother Wu, actually what I despise the most is those who ride on the coattails of their ancestors to act like tyrants and be complacent." Wu Jueqing said indifferently, "Is that so?" Bu Luqing nodded vigorously. "Yes. Back then, the morning breeze blew in the universe and the clouds drifted in the outer heavens. How impressive was that? That was really sweeping through the heavens and dominating the world. No one dared to look directly at it. But, tens of thousands of years later, everything has already changed." If his grandson is still using these 2 sentences to run rampant in the martial world, tell me, wouldn't that be very embarrassing? Wouldn't that be a huge joke? Right. A name that has decayed for tens of thousands of years, Brother Wu, tell me, what's the point of still shouting about it? Damn it, isn't this digging a grave? Wu Jueqing panted heavily and clenched his fists tightly. His voice was as cold as the underground wind. "Brother Bu, 3 days later you will see the power of these 2 sentences." Bu Luqing laughed coldly. "This I can't deny it. I will take on the power of Qin Feng and Lu Yun head on. But I'm worried. I might not be able to see Wu Jueqing's power." Wu Jueqing stared at him, the veins on his temples pulsing. He said word by word, "Brother Bu, you will see it. 3 days later is not too late. In these 3 days, Brother Bu, you have to conserve your energy. When the time comes, When the time comes, Qin Feng and Lu Yun will have no descendants. Bu Luqing pressed on. Don't be called Wu Jueqing anymore. Change your name to Wu Juehao. Swoosh. Wu Jueqing's whip flew up violently. He couldn't hold it in any longer and was about to strike. Bu Luqing had been waiting for this moment. He let out a long howl. Tribulation calming force. Nothing more. Descendant of Qin Feng. Nothing more. Wu Jueqing, looks like you also joined forces with others when you fought Ning Tianya, right? I'm really not looking down on you. With your little cultivation and self-restraint, even I look down on you, let alone injuring Ning Tianya? Ah. You've been tricked by the Tribulation Sword Master your whole life. Sure enough, you've learned some despicable and shameless ways. Wu Jueqing held the whip with one hand and the braid with the other. His breathing became more and more rapid. He was still forcefully suppressing the anger that was about to erupt. Bu Luqing, 3 days later you will pay the price. With a flash of sword light, Bu Luqing unsheathed his sword and pointed it at Wu Jueqing. He laughed loudly. Wu Jueqing. Why wait for 3 days? Come. Grandpa will send you on your way, lest your ancestors and your tribulation brothers wait too long. Bu Luqing wasn't such a sharp person. But the moment he heard that Ning Tianya was in danger, he exploded. No matter what, he had to vent his anger. Wu Jueqing raised his head and roared. 3 days later I will definitely kill you. Suddenly there was a thunderous sound. Wu Jueqing's white figure disappeared in the wind and snow. For the sake of the grand plan 3 days later, Wu Jueqing chose to tolerate it. But he couldn't tolerate it any longer. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Originally, he was also trying to provoke Bu Luqing into holding back for the final battle 3 days later. Although he was so angry now, he had already achieved his goal. A little impatience spoils great plans. He retreated. Chapter 1101. Bu Luqing's mocking words spread far and wide. Wu Jueqing, who had already gone far away, was so angry that he almost ground his teeth into pieces. He almost couldn't help but turn back to have a showdown. But in the end he managed to hold himself back. His body flew forward as if he was flying, smashing all the mountains, trees, houses, people and beasts along the way into pieces. Bu Luqing looked at Wu Jueqing's departing figure and snorted coldly. So what if he is the successor of Qin Feng? If you dare to hurt old Ning, I'll make sure you die a horrible death in 3 days. If Qin Feng and Lu Yun are sad, they can come and find me. Do you really think that no one dares to touch you just because you're carrying the banner of your ancestor? Bah. Invincible? Even in the upper 3 heavens he is still known as invincible. Bu Luqing turned his head and saw that the conversation was still going on. Bu Luqing didn't want to disturb them, so he sat down while swearing. His brows furrowed. Did something really happen to old Ning? On the other side, the Dharma Supreme walked forward with his hands clasped behind his back. Yu Lingxue followed him confidently. The two of them were like a pair of best friends who could talk about anything, strolling in the snow. Brother Yu, this day has finally come. The Dharma Supreme stopped in his tracks and smiled faintly. The heaven-nourishing jade has been successfully cultivated. That's right. Yu Lingxue snorted. I personally witnessed the entire process of refining the heaven-nourishing jade. The Dharma Supreme chuckled. You are very patient, to think that you didn't destroy the refinement of the heaven-nourishing jade. Yu Lingxue shook his head. If the heaven-nourishing jade is destroyed, the Medicine Valley will be devoured and destroyed. The Medicine Valley has been saving lives all these years, saving countless lives. Although I want to destroy it, I can't do so at the cost of the Medicine Valley's destruction. The Dharma Supreme said mockingly, so Brother Yu is actually a man with lofty ideals who cares for the world. Yu Lingxue said furiously, what do you mean? Could it be that as a Dharma Supreme, you only view the common people of the world as ants? The Dharma Supreme shook his head. That's not the case. It's just that Brother Yu is now acting as the villain's accomplice. That's why I felt the need to speak. Accomplice to the evildoer? Yu Lingxue burst into laughter. Dharma Supreme, your words are really strange. The Dharma Supreme chuckled and said, 10,000 years of rule of law in the heavens, how about that? Over the past 10,000 years, although I, as the Dharma Supreme, can't say that my contributions far surpass those of my ancestors, I can still stabilize the heavens. The heavenly layer aristocratic families kept each other in check, and the enforcers attacked in all directions. Punishing villains, promoting kindness and punishing evil. Although there were also black sheep among the law enforcement officers, once they were discovered, they would be dealt with immediately and never tolerated. Brother Yu, these are all. Do you admit it? Yu Lingxue nodded. That's right, I admit it. The heavenly layer has been peaceful for 10,000 years. However, the Great War never broke out. All of these were due to the law enforcers' checks and balances. Until now, there were so many supreme martial artists in the heavenly layer. This was the proof. If the war continues, I'm afraid that 80% of the people in these sovereign lands will die early. Do you agree? Yu Lingxue nodded again. That's right. You have contributed greatly to this. I admit it. The Dharma Supreme heaved a long sigh of relief. However, once the Tribulation Sword Master ascends to the heavens, there will be a bloodbath. The great aristocratic families would be razed to the ground. At that time, the flames of war will surely reach the heavens, and the people will be plunged into misery and suffering. Do you agree? Yu Lingxue said, I admit it. Since that's the case, you still want to help the Tribulation Sword Master. If that's not helping the devil, what is it? The Dharma Supreme said lightly. You're taking things out of context. Yu Lingxue said coldly, firstly, the law enforcement officer's duty. For the past 10,000 years, it was to help the Tribulation Sword Master. However, you overturned it. Secondly, if you say that you're doing it for the sake of the world, I can tolerate it. However, you have to touch your conscience and tell me. Are you? Yu Lingxue said righteously, you're not. When the Tribulation Sword Master ascends, there will be a bloodbath. That's for sure. However, what's the reason? It's to make use of the blood-red fate energy to nourish the heavens. To let the heavenly layer continue for another 10,000 years. This is something that has been proven to be feasible. Nourishing the heavens after 10,000 years is something that has been proven many times in the Black Blood Forest. Once it reaches 1,000 years, the Black Blood Forest, where the heavenly layer folds, will be soft and about to collapse. Only the Tribulation Sword Master can nourish the heavens. However, you suggested a supreme to nourish the heavens. It has already continued for 10,000 years. However, let me ask you. You said that you can ensure the stability of the heavenly layer for 10,000 years. How do you explain the softness of the Black Blood Forest now? Yu Lingxue said angrily, since 8,000 years ago, some places have already started to collapse. We law enforcement officers have all received reports about these. Why did you ignore them? Why didn't you say that your supreme to nourish the heavens had an effect? At least, after the Tribulation Sword Master nourished the heavens, it didn't move for 8,000 years. However, you've already nourished the heavens 8 times. Yet, the heavens still collapsed when they should and became soft when they should. Why didn't you do anything about it? 10,000 years ago, we witnessed with our own eyes how the heavens and earth collapsed before the Tribulation Sword Master nourished the heavens. At that time, one collapse would reduce the number of people in the lower 3 heavens by 1/3. At least a few countries would be eliminated from the lower 3 heavens. Millions of people would perish in the upper 3 heavens. One collapse would cause the disappearance of billions of lives. You've seen all these with your own eyes. Now you're out of your mind to nourish the heavens. However, it's of no use. You're taking the future of the heavenly layer as a joke. If the Tribulation Sword Master fails to nourish the heavens because of you, billions of lives would be lost because of you. The entire heavenly layer would be completely destroyed. This would be your fault. Can you bear the responsibility? As the Dharma Supreme, you've done many things all these years to ensure the peace of the heavenly layer. However, if you cause the destruction of the heavenly layer, no matter how many good deeds you've done, can you live with a clear conscience? Can you bear the responsibility? Yu Lingxue sneered. I know that you've already reached the realm of collapsing the heavens and shattering the void. However, I don't know what method you used to hide your cultivation. However, once the heavenly layer collapses and you release your cultivation, you'll be able to leave this world and live. However, these billions of lives would be doomed. Can you bear the responsibility? You're frighteningly selfish. Frighteningly cruel. Frighteningly cold-blooded. Yu Lingxue said heavily. The Dharma Supreme looked at Yu Lingxue with admiration. Brother Yu, all these years, I've always thought that you're hot-blooded and honest. I didn't expect you to think so far ahead. Yu Lingxue snorted and asked, somewhat puzzled, Dharma Supreme, let me ask you something. The Dharma Supreme smiled lightly, his black hair fluttering in the snow. He said, you want to ask me? I have everything. I'm basically the Supreme of the world. Even if I support the Tribulation Sword Master, I'm still the Dharma Supreme. I have no more desires. Why do I have to go against the Tribulation Sword Master? Yu Lingxue nodded and looked at him seriously. I think there must be a reason. The Dharma Supreme was silent for a long time. Then he said, "There is a reason, but I can't tell you." Yu Lingxue nodded and said, "However, even if you have your reasons, you shouldn't take the world as a joke." The Dharma Supreme heaved a long sigh. Gazing at the snow, his eyes were filled with deep nostalgia and deep hatred. He said indifferently, "All living beings in the world." He said indifferently, "What has it got to do with me?" Yu Lingxue nodded slowly. "All right." The Dharma Supreme said indifferently, "Brother Yu, you can see it too. This Dharma Supreme is a joke. However, if Brother Yu wants to destroy it, it's like a mantis trying to stop a chariot." Yu Lingxue sneered. "If Brother Yu really wants to, I'll give you a chance to take revenge." The Dharma Supreme said indifferently. "A chance to take revenge?" Yu Lingxue stared blankly. "Yes, a chance to take revenge. Not a chance to help the Tribulation Sword Master. Don't talk to me like you care about the world, it's so annoying." The Dharma Supreme said indifferently, "Back then your master died in my hands. After so many years, you and your wife have always wanted to take revenge, right?" Yu Lingxue shuddered. He suddenly looked up. "My master died in your hands?" The Dharma Supreme said indifferently, "Your master was hit by the heartless palm. I was the one who hit him with the heartless palm." Yu Lingxue was suddenly so angry that his face turned red and his whole body trembled. The moment the Dharma Supreme said the words heartless palm, Yu Lingxue knew at once that it was true. "Don't blame me. If I didn't kill him, how could I be the Dharma Supreme?" The Dharma Supreme smiled gently. "However, no matter what, I still understand that you want to take revenge for your master. So I'll give you this chance. Take it as the final compensation for our 10,000 years of brotherhood." Yu Lingxue was so angry that he couldn't speak. After a long time he said word by word in a trembling voice, "I was wondering who could do it so flawlessly. So it's you." The Dharma Supreme looked at him with pity. "Poor thing. To be kept in the dark for 10,000 years. 3 days later after you nourish the sky, I'll be at Mount Xingyun. I'll be waiting for you and your wife. We'll settle our grudges with a battle. Do you dare to come?" Yu Lingxue's eyes were red and he took 2 deep breaths. "Mountain of knives and sea of flames." The Dharma Supreme smiled. "Even at the cost of my life? I love to see others in grief and indignation. Especially powerless grief and indignation, it's even more satisfying. 3 days later. I'll let you have a taste of this and then I'll personally send you and your wife on your way." Yu Lingxue let out a roar and punched out crazily. The Dharma Supreme caught it with his palm and his body floated out along with the force of his palm. He floated out for 70 feet as if he was riding on the clouds in the heavy snow. His faint laughter could be heard faintly. "Brother Yu, after 10,000 years of being together, I actually can't bear to kill you." Yu Lingxue let out a sorrowful howl. A loud bang was heard in the snow and Bu Liuqing's voice could be heard. "Dharma Supreme, let me ask you, are you involved in Ning Tianya's matter?" The Dharma Supreme chuckled and said, "Brother Bu, 3 days later when you arrive at Mount Xingyun, I'll tell you about Ning Tianya's whereabouts and his last words. I'll also give you a chance to take revenge." "Ah." He let out a long laugh and leaped into the air. He flashed and turned continuously in 10 directions in the air, dodging Bu Liuqing's attack. He leaped to a height of several thousand feet and disappeared into the wind and snow in a flash. His long recitation could be heard in the wind and snow. "How many years? A flourishing time. Who truly murdered me? Do you remember the feelings back then were extinguished? How much hatred turned into dust? Go, go, go. Let my heart, let the world down." His voice actually sounded a little desolate. It was as if the Dharma Supreme's black robe and black hair were still fluttering in the wind, walking alone, like a lonely demon god. Bu Liuqing roared, "Dharma Supreme! You bastard!" The second update is still being edited. Requesting monthly votes. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.